This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate the first part of What If Immortal Naruto Humiliated Erza Scarlet. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
As usual, a very unusual day in the life of the Fairy Tale Magic Guild began. Erza was eating her favorite cheesecake. Lucy was waiting for her package. Happy was eating something. Mirajane had just finished serving more beer, and Natsu and Gray were fighting once more. Everyone was content because they had just finished studying S-class mages and missions, and the day was pleasant. Guild Master Makarov had just stopped Natsu from going on one and slammed him to the ground like a squashed bug. Lucy looked up from her work at a table where she was organizing her celestial spirit keys when her name was called. She noticed that her package had arrived in the mail when she saw a uniformed figure standing at the front door. She thanked the mail carrier, hurried back to her seat, and began to open her package so excitedly that Happy and Natsu noticed. "Hey, Lucy, what do you have with you?" Natsu asked, appearing before her almost out of nowhere and frightening her to death in the process. Happy added, "Hey, is it food?" to the conversation. Lucy yelled, "No, you stupid cat," with determination. "It's a book." "A half." Naked Gray said, "Book? What kind of book is it, Lucy?" With a furious huff, she yelled, "Why are you stripping? Besides, this is a novel by the legendary and brand new writer of beautiful romance novels, Hokage Sama. Ha, first came from Natsu, followed by Ge, and Sama from Happy. Hage. Sama? The three of them then asked simultaneously. "No, you stupid thugs." Lucy yelled at them. "Hokage Sama, not Hage, Sama." Mirajane said, "So, Lucy, what's the book about?" This was a name she had never heard of. "Yes, Lucy, why are you so interested in this book?" replied Erza. Now that everyone was looking at her, Lucy cleared her throat. This book is the latest installment in a saga about a young man's journey through a world of strange and destructive magic, and how he fights to protect his loved ones. This series of novels started about 3 years ago, and popular with both men and women because Hokage Sama is able to balance adult scenes, true romance, and intense fight scenes, all in his Life of a Shinobi book series. The guild hall was suddenly enveloped in an awkward silence. Lucy was the only one who had mysteriously stopped. She looked around and saw that everyone was pale and scared, as if they had seen a ghost. No, more akin to a furious demon. "Lucy, what did you just say?" Natsu hissed urgently under his breath. The blonde celestial spirit mage started, "I said, the book's called Life of a She," before her new friends covered her mouth. Suddenly, as if determined to crush her and the rest of the guild, a wave of oppressive force descended. As Lucy searched the area for the source of that sensation, she saw something horrifying. The Titania of Fairy Tale, Erza Scarlet, was furious. No, the word, angry, wasn't sufficient to characterize her feelings at the moment. Erza's eyes were red and on the verge of exploding in their faces, and she was boiling with rage. They saw the ocean of red magical power form beneath her feet as she became enraged. The redhead screamed, "Shish, Shinobi!" and launched an assault as the room's tables were all destroyed by an explosion. The first to ultimately find themselves fighting for their lives were Natsu and Gray. Happy and Lucy made their getaway behind the bar counter, where Mirajane was waiting for them. Lucy made the astute decision to ask, "Mirajane-san, what's all this about?" "Oh, I forgot you're new," the young woman with white hair shrugged. "You wouldn't know." Lucy said, No what, Mirajane-san? The taboo word," Mirajane muttered angrily. "Taboo? What taboo word?" "Heh heh heh, Shinobi, is the taboo word," laughing, Mirajane said. "Sorry, I just like to mess around sometimes. Anyway, my explanation's a long story. Listen carefully because I won't repeat myself." Lucy nodded and said, "I'm all ears, Mirajane-san," to which Happy replied, "So am I." The demon of Fairy Tale with white hair sighed, "Okay. The story begins 2 years ago, when Erza went on an S-class quest to find some man with a bounty. I don't remember how much. Anyways, she went to some forest out west, found the man she was looking for, and battled him." Rewind. 2 years prior, Erza Scarlet, 17, was strolling through Crocus, the Fiorian capital. She was looking into reports of a mage who was much stronger than an S-class mage. He had killed some of Zaref's most repulsive demons, resurrected recently deceased loved ones without sacrificing another person's life, and was not affiliated with any guild. In the previous 5 months, he had accomplished all of those accomplishments. In order to determine whether this mage posed a threat to her guild, Fairy Tail, she sought to apprehend him. She didn't know what to think of that actually succeeded in building something even vaguely resembling the Tower of Heaven. Not now that Jelal has taken over the project and is fixated on seeing it through to completion. She pinned herself against the closest alley wall to get more information after one of the guards she was passing said, "You okay, Sam? I thought that monster near the valley had killed you." Sam, a different male voice, seemed to concur. The Titania peered out of the alley and saw the guard in question pulling up his shirt to reveal his torso unmarred by scars that normally accompany the healing of skin. Breaking injuries. Yeah, I would have died if that stranger hadn't saved me. See, he even healed my wounds. I don't even have a scar. Guy said he only patched me up, but the doctors say that he completely healed the wounds. Erza found this information to be of great interest. What do you know about the mage in the Western Forest? She asked the guards as she approached them, who remarked on her beauty in whispers. Started one of them. Another said, well, that's to say. She lost patience and punched them both once, rendering them unconscious. Okay, what do you want to know? He yelled as she moved towards Sam, the final one. I'm investigating the mage who saved you, so I'm trying to find him, she declared arrogantly. He gulped nervously as she barraged the poor guard with more questions, reminding him of how she had knocked out his fellow countrymen. What does this mage look like? Where was the last place that you saw him or her? Was there anything special about this mage that stood out to you? However, he let out a resigned sigh when he saw Titania from Fairy Tail becoming agitated. She could see the valley beyond the open city gates to his left. The mage that saved my life and healed me was a powerful young man. There was a demon of some kind that attacked my squad in the Western Valley, he said. Sam rubbed his head and continued. This unknown mage destroyed the demon with some sort of powerful fire magic. I've never seen any kind of magical fire that could instantly cremate a corpse, bones and all, to ash, and certainly not in the span of several seconds. Erza scowled at what the guards had said. He continued, looking out into the forest on the other side of the Western Valley, saying, once he'd patched me up, or so he said, I noticed him walking into the forest. Erza nudged. The forest at the far end of the valley in which you were ambushed. And he gave a weary nod. He muttered as she left for the forest. He was a strange man if I ever saw one. He sighed when she turned back to face him. He wore a long, sleeved black coat with a white flame pattern on the hemline. I did see strange writing written down the back of his coat, though. That might be his native language. He was wearing some kind of hood, so I could not see his face. Please don't hurt him. I owe him my life. Erza walked away, squinting her eyes and remaining silent. When anything even vaguely related to Zaref was at stake, she couldn't afford to be sentimental. She arrived at the Western Forest later that day and began searching for any hints she could follow. She trudged on, unable to find anything noteworthy, until she came upon a massive lake in the center of the forest. A figure with its back to her caught her attention, but it was unimportant. No, the issue was that this figure appeared to be sitting on solid ground while meditating on the water. It was also noteworthy that the water in the lake twirled around the stranger's body, creating a mild vortex that pulled at the lake's edges. Erza then recalled what Sam, the guard, had told her, and she saw that the stranger on the lake was dressed exactly as described. The man eventually got up and reached out over the water. Water bubbles emerged from the lake and then started to rise from its boundaries as though nature itself was following his instructions. Before she could believe that she was seeing water bubbles floating in midair like soap bubbles, she had to rub her eyes. And to top it all off, there were fish in the bubbles. Erza turned and hid behind a nearby tree, silently observing him as he made his way to shore and began gathering twigs and pieces of wood. After creating a campfire, he quickly had a nice blaze going by making. No, he breathed out a fire, much like Natsu's Karyu no Koko spell did. Returning to the water bubbles, still suspended in mid-air, he reached in and removed each one individually. He placed them close to the fire and began to cook them, actually spitting their bodies on wooden skewers. Erza's nose twitched as the scent drifted through the trees. She realized, a little too late, that she hadn't eaten since leaving the city. As her mouth started to water and her stomach rumbled violently, she was starving now. Her target took a seat close to the fire and waited calmly. His fried fish was ready after what felt like an eternity of torture with aroma. He picked one up and opened his mouth to bite into it, then stopped. She quickly hid behind her tree, but when he called to her, she winced. "Hey, pretty lady, would you like some fish?" Despite herself, she was shocked. It was implied by his words that he had been aware of her presence but had remained silent. She could feel herself blushing sheepishly as she stepped out from behind her tree and into his line of sight after he had caught her. Then she recalled her initial objective and braced herself. When the man in black handed her a fish on a stick, she approached him and sat down across from him. As she cautiously bit into its fried flesh, she was struck by how remarkably flavorful his simple fare was. Erza became interested in her target as they ate in silence. She was sure that he was the man she had been searching for, the same man who was said to be able to imitate Zeref's resurrection magic and his notorious black magic. She was also wary because he appeared so modest but had such dark power and could use it so carelessly. She had heard the tales while pursuing him, how he could bring the prematurely deceased back to life. How fire magic and other nature-based combat magic seemed incapable of harming him. When he asked her, "Well, pretty lady, what's a beautiful girl like you doing out here?" she became agitated and he raised his hands in surrender, bringing her out of her reverie. "Relax, girl. I'm not saying that you're weak or anything, but people coming here is rather rare." Oddly, she was taken aback that he didn't perceive her as weak like other girls, but it's possible that he assumed this because she had been wearing her armor. Strangely encouraged by this logic, she replied, "I'm looking for a mage who's said to be stronger than most S-class mages. He's unaffiliated to any of the known magic guilds. My own magic guild, Fairy Tail, sent me to confirm his existence and determine his threat potential." After grinning under his hood, the man said coolly, "Well, I'm not a mage, per se, so I'm guessing that you've found your target." "I was aware of it." The swordswoman with the red hair grinned glumly. "This guy. He's the one whose strength could easily compete with Zeref's, Jelal." Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when she said, "Very well, I challenge you to a duel." The hooded man repeated, fascinated, "A challenge, you say?" and then shrugged in fatalistic acceptance. "Very well, I accept. But I would first like to know my challenger's name." "I am Erza Scarlet, from the Fairy Tail Magic Guild of Fury," she declared with pride. The hooded man bowed to her formally at the waist and said, "Well, I'm glad to meet you, Erza Chan," seemingly oblivious to her blush. "Naruto Uzumaki, displaced shinobi at your service." She had never heard the term, shinobi, before, and she was about to inquire when the hooded man responded. "I am a ninja, a mercenary to be hired to do any and all kinds of jobs," he replied. "I work in the same way that mages like you would take any task available." She scowled to herself. He implied that ninjas took jobs typically held by dark guilds when he said that they took a variety of jobs. But, Naruto continued, popping his neck, "I'm a nomad now, and I've more or less retired from that life." He said, "But enough about me and my story." Getting to his feet and extending his body slightly, he turned to face her, bowed ostentatiously, and pointed to a clearing nearby. "Shall we?" She got to her feet, equipped her favorite one-handed sword magically, and assumed a fighting stance. However, the shinobi called out before they could begin, "I'm saying sorry in advance." She scowled and said, "Why are you sorry? We haven't even started yet." A katana with a braided gray wrap on its hilt and an elaborate oval black guard was visible through a puff of smoke. A crimson cord hung close to the mouth of the scabbard, which was also black and composed of plain, traditional lacquered wood. His right hand brought out the katana, which he held parallel to the ground, its jet black blade apparently absorbing the surrounding light. "I said that I'm sorry because I'm apologizing in advance for beating you in combat," the hooded man retorted. Erza twitched with annoyance. This nameless mage could insult her and get away with it, but who was he? She exclaimed, "Konso Tenrin no Yoroi," as her heart cruise changed and glowed. Out of a flash of light, she reappeared with a sword in each hand and a fresh set of ornately gleaming silvery armor. At the sight, Naruto could only whistle. Erza was not only gorgeous and seductive, but her hair made him think of his mother. He said, "Did you know that you look beautiful in that armor?" to flatter her and agitate her. Before she realized that she was going to kill this idiot for disparaging her strength, The unexpected compliment caused her to blush and stammer. She scowled at him while taking a few deep breaths to control her rage. She shouted, "Trinity's sword," and slashed at the hooded man while crossing her arms. Death and destruction were promised as a luminous delta. Shaped energy waves shot out from the tips of both her swords and flew in his direction. The hooded man then vanished, evading the explosion and reappearing in a crouch a few feet behind her. Its guard clicked noisily as he sheathed his sword. Stunned by his speed, Erza was unaware of what had just transpired. Her armor fell to pieces and her sword splintered into shards before she could ask him. Naruto would have seen her nude, so she considered herself fortunate to have been wearing underwear. But to make things worse, he made a remark about her situation. My, an angel in that armor and so sexy when you're not wearing it." She could feel her face getting hotter. She wasn't sure if she should be angry at the man's obscene remark or ashamed of her embarrassment. But he disappeared in a swirling whirlwind of dust and leaves just as she was about to act on both feelings. After his body was gone, she heard his voice on the wind. "We'll meet again, Benihime-chan." Flashback end. "And that's how Erza was defeated for the first time in her life," Mirajane murmured. If she heard rumors about a strange mage, she'd automatically go and investigate, to find out if that Naruto the shinobi character was the source of the rumor. If he was indeed there, she'd challenge him again, and the results would always be the same. She'd be defeated, her swords broken, with her armor shattered into pieces and leaving her in her underwear. Lucy said, "I see, but who is he? How strong is he to play with Erza-san like that?" Sighing, the demon of fairy tale said, "That's the problem. A lot of different guilds want him to join them, but whenever they sent mages out to recruit him, he'd beat them up pretty badly before dumping their bodies in random places. When simple offers didn't work, they began resorting to bribery. Even the King of Fury tried, but Naruto would simply refuse all incentives. As for us, we only sent Erza that one time, when he beat her for the first time, but all the other times he humiliated her was because she kept after him for a rematch." "I see," Lucy muttered considerately. The fighting stopped as soon as she said those words and a stranger came in the front door. As the stranger made his way to the bar, the mages there took note of his height, roughly 6 feet. He was wearing a hooded black cloak that obscured his face. Erza gritted her teeth in helpless rage and remained silent. She was upset with this man because she knew him. He wore armor, as evidenced by the faintly muffled clanking of metal. Mirajane said, "Welcome to Fairy Tale, sir. How can I help you?" as he sat on a stool in front of her. The voice of the hooded man was deep and icy. "I'd like a beer first, and then talk to your master about joining your guild." There was a brief period of silence before chaos broke out in the room. X784 On August 7th the man scowled. "What's wrong? You guys deaf or something? I said that I'd like some beer and that I want to join your guild. Where's your master, anyway?" "Naruto," someone said. Naruto, the man in the cloak, turned to see Erza staring at him. He said, "Ah, Erza-chan, I didn't see you there, yo." And then he turned back to his beer, ignoring her and the others. As he continued to ignore her, she became enraged. She finally threw a punch at him, but he stopped it with a single finger without even glancing at her. He turned to face her after gulping down the remainder of his drink. He said, "Can't a guy drink a beer in peace?" And then pushed her fist away with his finger, which is likely how she got the idea that he wasn't happy with her. She said, trying to relax, "I thought you said that you'd never join a guild because you're not a mage." Naruto sassed her while Mirajane gave him another beer. "I said that I'm not a mage, but I didn't say that I'd never join a guild," Naruto said. "Also, I said that I'm not a mage so much as I'm a warrior, a special warrior. But where's your master, anyway? I need to speak to him or her immediately." He said, "Keep the change." He got up and dropped 5,000 jewels onto Mirajane's tray. He turned to Erza, and Mirajane nodded and thanked him. "So, Erza-chan, where's your master?" The room's men started chatting among themselves. Erza's punch could be stopped by this cloaked weirdo with a single finger, yet he treats her like a longtime friend? Who was he? Natsu's eyes were burning. Because this new guy had to be strong, he wanted to challenge this stranger who could block Erza's meanest punch with just one finger. A raspy voice sounded from the second floor just as he opened his mouth to make his challenge. Naruto looked up and saw Makarov Drayar, the master of Fairy Tale, saying, "I Makarov Drayar. Am the master of this here guild. The man was quite elderly and very short. He wore a humorous orange, blue, striped jester hat to conceal his thick mustache and white hair around his balding skull. He had dark eyes. Well, you're a lot smaller than I thought, Naruto said sardonically, causing the little man to faceplant in response. The guild mages started giggling among themselves, and he hurried back up, coughing into his fist. He waited for a response before asking, "What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Naruto?" "Naruto Uzumaki, a humble shinobi at your service," the man in the cloak said as he bowed momentarily at it. The much older man gave a slight nod in return. As Naruto used the word shinobi, which had become her bad habit, Erza twitched. Having seen Erza's rage and not wanting to contribute to it, Natsu, Happy, and Gray kept quiet. Lucy hit the open palm of her other hand with her fist after suddenly realizing something. Mirajane abruptly put a hand on Lucy's mouth to silence her before she could say something foolish in the heat of the moment. "Wait, then he's the one that Erza couldn't defa. Hey!" She squealed in horror, but was rudely interrupted. The white-haired woman said, "Sorry, Lucy," in a desperate whisper. "But can you keep what I told you to yourself? Erza only told us girls in the guild about Naruto beating her all the time, so none of the guys know." The poor, frightened girl nodded, speechless in the face of Erza's raging fury. "How's about we make a bet about our latest fight, Erza-chan? But I'll have to wrap up my business with your master before we fight. What do you say?" Naruto asked Erza, who was vibrating from the intensity of her rage. He caught her in her hot moment, and she flushed. The Titania stammered, "Oh. Okay." Her feelings at odds with one another. "After you finish your business, I will fight you." After giving a solemn nod, Naruto turned to look at Makarov as he leapt from the second story. "Do you have a place where could talk?" he asked gravely. The elderly man realized right away that he had a significant topic to discuss. The elderly man gave a nod, saying, "My office is upstairs." He gestured to the balcony on the second floor. Naruto nodded, followed him, and the two of them vanished into the guild's interior. The guild members started chatting among themselves, speculating about how Erza and Naruto would fight. "Oh, man. He's crazy strong. I'll fight him after Erza. What do you think, Happy?" exclaimed Natsu excitedly. Happy replied, "Aye. But if he's that strong, then you'll lose. Natsu, you're doomed." "What?" yelled the Fire Dragon Slayer, scowling at Happy, betrayed. The feline was obligingly staring the other way. Then Gray stepped in. "Happy's right. You're so weak that you can't even beat me. What hope do you have of beating someone that Erza wants to fight?" "What did you say, you pervert?" Natsu thrust his head angrily into Gray's face and roared. Gray snapped back, "What did you call me, you hot-headed idiot?" into his mouth. Erza grabbed them both and slammed their heads against the closest wall, knocking them out as they started pushing each other. The redhead ignored them and pondered, panting in poorly controlled rage. "How does he beat me every time?" she asked herself. "Am I not strong enough? Am I too frail?" Erza threw Elfman into Mirajane after he made the mistake of opening his mouth so she could see him, sending the two of them flying into Freed and Bixlow. She was still too preoccupied to realize what had happened. Apart from his sword technique, he has never used any magic in our fights, she thought logically. To be honest, I've never seen that design by any blacksmith anywhere, so that sword is pretty unique to my knowledge. Erza sliced it absently as Kana hefted up another barrel of beer for herself, leaving the drunken card magic user drenched in beer and twitching furiously but otherwise unwilling to further enrage the red-headed swordswoman. "I am aware of his strength, but he has never fought me maliciously. Even though I've never seen his face, I get the impression that he's always grinning. Why, though, does he cover his face? Why is that so important to me?" Mirajane saw her old rival deep in contemplation. Despite herself, she grinned. "Oh. Ho," she laughed and said, "Someone has a crush." "Erza likes Naruto," childishly sang Happy. Lucy was shocked that she was made to appear like a child by someone so much stronger than Erza. She noticed that the redhead was absorbed in her thoughts as she glanced over at her. The blonde celestial spirit mage sighed and returned to her seat facing Mirajane. Makarov leapt over his desk to sit down when they arrived at his office. Naruto pulled down his hood to show his face and sat down, gesturing to the chair in front of him. Despite having a distinctive appearance, he resembled any young man in his late teens. His golden, blonde hair was shoulder length, and his bangs gave the impression that he could conceal his eyes behind them if he so desired. Interestingly, he had what looked like 3 horizontal whiskered lines on each cheek. His blue eyes were piercing and dazzling. Makarov, however, saw that Naruto's eyes revealed a long acquaintance with heartbreaking loneliness. This shinobi had the demeanor of a seasoned combatant, cloaked in the grief of a man who had lost everything that meant much to him. At last, the elderly man let out a weary sigh. Despite his belief in magic and people, his spoiled subordinates all shared a history of trauma. The old man thought to himself, eyes like these shouldn't be on anyone so young. He reminds me of Erza when she first came here. At last, he said out loud, "What do you need from me, my boy?" Naruto leaned back in his chair and sighed. The reason that my powers are so unusual and devastating is partially because I'm from another dimension. Makarov sensed a raised eyebrow. Since Mistogen had claimed to be from Edilus, a parallel and alternate version of Earthland, he was familiar with the idea. However, he hadn't given much thought to the possibility that locations similar to Edilus could also exist. "What do you mean?" he asked, intrigued despite himself. Makarov twitched when Naruto said, "My native world is mired in constant wars and battles, with very short periods of peace in between. I used to belong to a village of mercenaries that were not unlike your own magic guilds, powers and all, but I had to leave in order to ensure its safety." Curious, the old man asked, "How so?" His suspicions were well founded by all this talk of almost constant warfare, but the answer that awaited him only strengthened them. The young man with the blonde hair let out a sigh. "My world is kill or be killed, and I have my fair share of blood on my hands. We don't have magic like you, but rather jutsu and other ninja techniques. We fight by using an energy produced from within our bodies, what we call chakra. From I've heard of this Eternino stuff that you mages use, it seems similar to a type of nature energy that allows me to enhance my jutsu by several orders of magnitude." Makarov's eyebrow twitched once more. A wandering mage had discovered the ruins of a recently destroyed dark guild just 2 months prior. He warned the Rune Knights, who conducted an initial investigation and found that the guild's master had been fixated on increasing magical ability. Research data that suggested a secondary Eternino reserve in the human body was found during a follow-up investigation by the 10 wizard saints, which significantly increased a mage's magical power. After ordering 9 of his best mages to go through the process, the guild master became the 10th to join them. However, it was painful to activate this reserve. Only the guild master survived this tortuous process, which significantly increased his magical abilities, according to additional research. In a fit of wrath, however, he then massacred his followers before going into a catatonic state and succumbing to dehydration just 1 day before the roving mage discovered him. As soon as the Mage Council became aware of this development, they issued an order to confiscate the research data and to put an end to any attempt to replicate this process. He burst into tears when Naruto said, "However, I can still use my chakra, so I can use jutsu and even enhance them with nature energy. Ironically, this means that I cannot use magic directly. But I can use magical objects, though, probably because I was summoned here magically." "Summoned?" asked Makarov carefully. He had been sufficiently alarmed by Mistogen's brief discussion of Edilus' potent anima magic spell. "What do you mean by summoned? If this shinobi arrived in Earthland in the same manner?" Naruto shrugged and said, "I came here about 3 years ago. Now, when I found myself here in Earthland, I was in the middle of a circular ceiling technique array with a great deal of elaborately intricate subscript in its architecture." He slumped in his chair and poked his neck. "The mage that made this array, what I later learned was called a magic circle, said that he was trying to invent a space-time teleportation spell. Instead, it opened an interdimensional rip through the space-time continuum. I crashed into that tear when I was using my own space-time jutsu back in my dimension." Makarov winced. He had learned a certain lesson from his early magic experiments. If at all possible, avoid mixing spells. After speculating about the old geezer's thoughts, Naruto nodded. The blonde shinobi sighed bitterly. "Then, before I can ask the mage about the specifics of his spell, a bunch of guys from what he called a dark guild attacked us. During that fight, my body didn't work Probably because I'd just gotten here and the summoning took quite a toll on my body, but I could only fight physically, without using chakra at all. He took a deep breath and let it out loudly. I beat them all, but I was too late. One of those dark mages had already killed the mage that brought me here, and I didn't even know his name. So I took his body to a nearby town and asked the locals to bury him there. After that, I tried to look for a way home but couldn't find anything for a year. I even went to Era and asked a few questions. They said that there's some ancient time spell on record, but they didn't have anything on space, time magic or even interdimensional magic. The desperation in the young man's voice made Makarov wince. He looked up at his gloomy visitor and trailed off. So, you're telling me that you're from an entirely different dimension, then? You're also a superpowered warrior that can use our magic as well. That's a little hard to swallow, but the shinobi was the only person he had ever met who could keep a man's faculties intact after he had lost everything. The words, "I believe you, Naruto," came from Makarov. "I'll help you in any way I can, but even I don't know anything about such magic. What I'll do is tell everyone that you're from a faraway land and that your magic is unique. I'm glad that you want to join our family here in Fairy Tail, but I ask only one thing from you." The blonde man looked up at him inquiringly. Makarov winced slightly as his eyes hardened and he said, "Please don't kill your opponents, because that will make you a dark mage here." Asking Naruto to stop killing was essentially an unreasonable demand to any soldier worth his salt because he had been raised in a combative environment and had fought in a war where he had killed his opponent and become accustomed to doing so. However, the old man held his breath and let out a loud exhale when the blonde merely nodded in agreement. Carrying on, he stated, "You should also keep your life story to yourself until the guild members and I can trust you. But this is still your call, so you can tell anyone about it if you want. Also, I'd like to see how you fight, if you don't mind. By the way, is your magic, I mean, your jutsu, are they destructive?" Naruto gave a thin smile. "My jutsu are only as destructive as I need them to be. That said, my fight with Erza Chan is coming up soon. You could be the judge, see for yourself." Erza Chan? Riley, the elderly man thought to himself. She already lets him call her that? This boy is incredible. He is startled out of his daze by Naruto's voice. "Are you coming or what, Gramps?" When Makarov said, okay, hold your horses. Youngsters these days, so annoying." Everyone had assembled in a clearing behind guild headquarters in the meantime. They waited for Erza to kick the stranger, Naruto, in the butt. The truth, that Erza was going to have a tough time, was only known by their female members. Even though she claimed he did that to her each time they met and wasn't known for lying, they wanted to make sure she was actually going to have her armor torn to pieces and be left in nothing but her underwear. Erza, by the way, had her arms folded and was waiting in front of the crowd. "Who do you think will win now, Mira Chan?" Lucy asked, leaning in to stand beside Mira Jane. When the demon of Fairy Tail said, "I don't know, Lucy," he laughed and shrugged. "But since she's going to fight that man, this fight's going to be a great one." Then, shirtless, Gray continued, "Whoever he is, he can't beat Erza. She's the strongest woman in Fairy Tail." "Really?" sputtered Lucy. "She's that strong? But isn't he the one who?" She interrupted abruptly, attempting to avoid discussing her guildmates' humiliation and frequent losses. When resident bookkeeper Kana Alberona yelled, "Who are you going to bet on, the new stranger or our own Erza Scarlet?" behind Lucy and Mira Jane, Fairy Tail immediately burst into a flurry of wagers, with the majority placing bets on their Titania destroying the newcomer. Female guild members who had heard of Erza's numerous grudge matches and had a healthy penchant for gambling when the odds were in their favor were the ones who placed the wager that the stranger would prevail. Makarov stopped in front of Erza as he and Naruto, the hooded man, entered the center of the clearing. After giving them a steady look, she popped her knuckles and grabbed her favorite broadsword. Then Master Makarov said loudly, "This is not just a fight. We have a young man, from a faraway land, who wants to join our guild today. But I want to test his strength beforehand, so I'm using the Erza Scarlet Naruto Uzumaki fight in order to assess his power." With a, "One moment, please, Master," Naruto said. He swept his arm away, revealing his face and body to the guild members beneath his hooded cloak. He was a tall young man, perhaps 6 feet 2, in his late teens or early 20s, with deep, blue eyes and disheveled blonde hair spikes. He looked surprisingly feral because he had 3 birthmarks on both cheeks that resembled whiskers. He had on a sleeveless black muscle shirt, black pants, metal vambraces, fingerless gauntlets, black boots, and a black cloth that he wore like a bandana across his forehead. In addition, he had 2 weapon pouches fastened to his waist. Every female character in Fairy Tail immediately and uncontrollably let out a hormonal fangirl squeal. With hearts in their eyes, every woman and girl in the guild was swooning over him. The men were taken aback because they assumed he would be a typical-looking man. Steam blew out of Lucy's nose, and her eyes were filled with hearts. She exclaimed, "He's so handsome. He looks so sexy and cool." Happy exclaimed, "Is he a human cat?" In awe. Confused, Natsu repeated, "Human cat?" He became aware when he noticed Naruto's whiskers. "Oh, I see, he does look like a cat. But he looks strong. I'm so fired up. I want to challenge him right now." Not even Erza and Mirajane could resist blushing. "Look at those arms," was what they were both thinking. "He appears to have had his body carved out of stone." Makarov scowled as he considered the circumstances. "I had no idea he would have such a profound impact on the women of the guild." Erza and Mirajane are both flushed. "Are you two ready?" he asked, shaking his head and glancing at the 2 fighters. "This kid is going to break a lot of hearts." Erza and Naruto both nodded as they jolted out of their reverie. "All right, begin," Makarov yelled as both advanced into their respective battle stances. Monday, August 7th, X784 as Erza, the Fairy Queen, Scarlet squared off against the enigmatic newcomer. Tension was high in the air. Both murmurs and whispers were audible to them, but they chose to ignore the rabble and concentrate on their opponent instead. In their respective battle stances, the 2 fighters stood across from one another. Erza spread her legs apart to improve her position, and Naruto slightly flexed his fingers. The silence was broken by Master Makarov. He cried out, "Okay, are you ready?" loudly. Naruto simply gave a headshake. "Before we begin," he said, "let's make a bet, Benihime-chan. Since I'm going to be a member anyways, I'd like to take you out for dinner." "Well, that's if I win, anyways. However, if you win, I'll help you in any mission request for a month. What do you say?" he added, breaking the dead silence that followed his audacious proposal. "But how do I know that you will keep your promise if I win?" she asked with a smile. "I never break my word, or my name isn't Naruto Uzumaki," the blonde shinobi declared with a self-assured grin. She gave a small smile. "You've got yourself a deal, Naruto Uzumaki-san. A modest, "Oh, no, Naruto will do just fine," he said. "After all, we're part of the same guild now." Smugly, "As you wish, Naruto-kun," Erza said. Makarov had had enough of their flings. Crossly, he asked, "Are you 2 kids done flirting? We want to see a fight, so fight already." Both of them were decent enough to blush and return to their fighting positions. The diminutive Fairy Tail Magic Guild master swore under his breath about young brats and their flirting, shaking his head in mild annoyance. "So, are you ready?" he repeated, clearing his throat. Naruto and Erza both nodded. Taking a step back, Makarov yelled, "Then, begin." "Kanso. Ken no Maho," Erza exclaimed instantly, her magic power encircling her right hand as a sword appeared from the array. The weapon was a 4-foot long, bluish, steel sword with a cubic pommel and an angel wing guard. The red-headed swordswoman picked up the hilt and swung it around, bringing the sword to her side while keeping it above and parallel to the ground. Naruto gave a small smile. In response, he flexed his left hand and, with a puff of smoke, called forth a katana. The display stunned the members of Fairy Tail, including their master. They had never experienced such magic. The first person to discover her voice was Lucy Heartfilia. She stammered, "Didn't he say that he wasn't a mage? How did he use a kanso, then? He even has a Ken no Maho like Erza." She was answered by Master Makarov. The guild members were stunned, staring at the blonde shinobi and his summoned weapon in awe. Naruto does not use Eternano type magic like we do, but rather a similar energy that only his people can produce from their bodies. They call it chakra, and its many applications are varied and much more versatile than magic. His katana's hilt was wrapped in crimson braid and featured an elaborate oval silver guard. The white sheath was composed of what appeared to be conventional lacquered wood, and on the far end were a number of metallic silver decorations. Unaware of the sword he was wielding against her, Erza raised an eyebrow. Come hither, gesture was made with his left index finger as Naruto held his sword in his right hand, but he always had more balls than brains. As demonstrated by her quick run in his direction, Erza was also a woman who never backs down from a challenge. She slashed down at him in a flash of light, a vertical descending slash. However, he avoided her attack, forcing her to exert herself excessively before he struck her wrist with the tip of his scabbard, causing her to instinctively drop the long sword. She used her Kanso magic to swap out her long sword for a pair of short swords, which she held in a reverse grip, so that Naruto would not have an opportunity to attack her while she was vulnerable. She used her right hand sword to attack, slashing upward from below, but Naruto stopped her attack with his scabbard, shocking her by stopping her sword with a scabbard. She was unfazed, though, and swiftly followed up with a high-to-low slash with her left sword after flicking her left wrist to flip the sword in hand and use it normally. Naruto, however, had different plans. He quickly drew his katana, exposed just enough of its blade to capture her second sword, and successfully pinned her once more. Naruto moved his weight forward before she could free herself from his grip. He sheathed his katana again and stared expectantly at her after giving her a snap kick to the stomach that sent her flying back. Naruto's kick was so powerful that Erza felt the wind leave her lungs. Despite her simple Heart Cruise armor, she had felt that blow. She flipped in the air, landed gracefully, attempted a deep breath, and immediately winced in pain. Gazing downward, she winced at the deep ding in her armor and the pulsating pain associated with badly bruised ribs. Benihime. Chan, you should take this fight more seriously, Naruto grumbled absently. Taking his katana completely out of its sheath, he warned her, I won't be holding back anymore. Prepare yourself. His announcement caused Makarov and the rest of Fairy Tail to gasp, their mouths falling open. In contrast to his performance so far, he continued to hold back. They had never imagined anyone could put Erza on the ropes, much less compete with her in a sword fight. They were even more shocked by the dent in her armor, which was evidence of his physical prowess, and Erza's breathing difficulties. Despite knowing that her opponent was correct, the red-headed Titania of Fairy Tail glared at him. He wouldn't give her the win so easily, so she would need to finish this fight quickly. She screamed, Kanso, Kureha no Yoroi, and her armor started to glow golden before a suit of dark armor appeared in all its ominous splendor. Naruto smiled slightly at her maneuver. He teased, her lips curling into a friendly but perverted leer. Benihime. Chan, you're all dark and sexy and bewitching in a suit of black metal feathers. Deliciously suitable for your fashion sense, I'd say, he said. The male guild members agreed with him, but they would never have acknowledged it in front of her out of fear of her anger. Are you out of your mind? Do you want to die? Yelled Happy, Natsu, and Gray at once. When they saw that Erza was blushing in embarrassment, they all gave a face. Fail. Her face could have been the same color as her hair because she was blushing so much. But she noticed her fellow Fairy Tail members whispering amongst themselves and gave them all her worst glare, cowing them into a fearful silence. She was jolted out of her reverie by Naruto's amused laughter. Well, then, shall we let begin? She gave him a determined nod, and he went on, then come at me as though you're going to kill me. She sensed her eyes getting bigger. Are you? She started, uncertain whether she wanted to know the answer to her question that she had not yet asked. I know that you naturally hold yourself back, because your precious rules forbid you from killing, he murmured loudly. She could taste his annoyance at such a rule, and his face was deceptively smooth, but when he added, however, you cannot touch me unless you come at me as though you're trying to kill me, she abruptly stopped her assessment. The swordswoman with the red hair gave a nod. All right then, Naruto, but don't blame me when you lose, she said, ignoring the scimitar that typically accompanied this specific set of armor and ignoring the short swords. In what he recognized as the Mijishuden no Kame, a traditional kenjutsu stance that suggested she was right-handed, she took the new weapon in both hands and held it out in front of her. Before his customary joy turned to a cold hardness, Naruto merely laughed at the ridiculousness of Erza's claim. Erza frowned when she saw that Naruto was giving her a very low profile as he slid his right leg forward into a Badojutsu stance, bending his knees and crouching slightly. She realized that he was tightening his guard and minimizing his openings. Everyone's spines tingled at the sight of those emotionless, glacial blue eyes. Everyone there suddenly realized that Naruto was far more terrifying than Erza for some reason. The goal of this fight was to become serious, and both competitors looked at one another calculatingly. Erza launched herself into the attack, charging Naruto with a speed she had never shown before. She slashed at his head, and he was caught off guard by the blitzkrieg, almost losing the battle. To his surprise, she had chained her attack into a series of sword slashes, so he leaned back to avoid it. He was able to dance away from her blows, but the final one was too near, so he leapt back. His fingers were bloody when he reached up to dab at his cheeks because he could feel the liquid running down his face. He frowned when he realized that she had nicked him on the cheek. Calmly, "I congratulate you," he said. "Cutting me is a testament to your dedication and skill in armed melee combat. No one back home had managed to draw my blood in combat ever since I turned 17. Thank you for showing me that I've gotten soft." He turned to look at her and laughed. "Allow me to repay your kindness." Like a rocket, he sped forward, leaving a crater in his wake. As she waited for him, she held her sword low in Gedan no Kame and refused to back down. He quickly pulled out his katana and slashed at her, which she managed to block. Their eyes locked, and across the street came the loud clanging din of clashing metal. As he pressed the full force of his considerable physical strength against hers, a grimace formed on her lips. As they competed for supremacy, their swords brushed against one another. What absurd physical prowess! I was able to think to myself. The weight of Naruto's presence seemed to weigh down on her with all the unforgiving wrath of nature itself, and his eyes were lifeless and cold. Her thoughts returned to Jelal and how he had been transformed by what he referred to as the spirit of Zareth, and had turned ruthless and homicidal. But now here she was, standing against another man who had those same lifeless eyes and declared his willingness and ability to kill. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she nearly failed to notice Naruto trying to knock her out with a blow to the head with his sword scabbard. She was able to push back his sword and avoid the very tip of his sword scabbard by a centimeter as he swung at her. She saw an opportunity to slit his back open with a falling slash when he left it exposed in that crucial moment. She took the chance, but was taken aback when he abruptly flipped his hold on the sheath and slammed down on her descending sword. His sudden attack caused her weapon to recoil from the ground, and he launched an offensive. Erza had pinned her sword arm against Naruto's onslaught, but he had managed to turn around in midair, leaving her vulnerable. His katana now fell upon her, defenseless, as his scabbard swept past her field of vision. His sword nicked her just below the ribs, drawing blood as she barely escaped. He grinned thinly as he took in the entire scene. "She's quick," he thought. "She's still very impressive, but I've definitely softened." For a minute, she stood there, breathing heavily. The strain she was putting on herself caused her muscles to seem to creak and her lungs to burn in her chest. She glared at Naruto as she turned to face him, but all she saw was his smile grow wider. Observing that the only damage she had caused to him was the nick on his cheek, which had left behind dried blood after healing in some way. She scowled as she stumbled for a moment, balancing herself with her sword. He didn't even have the decency to look exhausted. She realized now that she had time to reflect. He appeared to be completely unconcerned as he fought her to within an inch of her life. How offensive. Who is he? With her right hand gripping her sword more tightly, she pondered. What gives him his strength? I can sense that he's still holding back a lot even now. Naruto called out to her as if he understood her rage at their disparity in strength. "Hey, what's wrong, Erza? You mad?" The final straw was that Erza's desire to kill increased sharply, but she still flared her magic in a tide of crimson fire. "I'm going to wipe that smug grin off your stupid face, Shinobi," she yelled, but her demand only made him smile more broadly, which only made her anger grow even more. She used her magic to blast at him, and a new cycle of swords clashed as their blades met. Erza was struggling to keep up her current speed, while Naruto was grinning like a savage. Since he was only avoiding or parrying her blows and allowing them to miss him by the thinnest of margins, she could see that he was still holding back. She gritted her teeth because he was purposefully keeping himself only a little bit faster than her. How is he going to be swayed? She let out a cry to herself. Then, after trapping her own scimitar beneath his katana with a sweep, Naruto struck out with a sidekick that sent her reeling back a few steps and disarmed her. Then, bouncing off his right foot, he dashed with great speed in her direction, his katana poised to cut her in two at the waist. Now without a weapon and unable to compete with him on an equal footing due to his tremendous strength, Erza took the best possible action. She sprinted in his direction and collapsed to her knees, stooping just far enough at the waist to avoid his sword before sliding in the direction of her own weapon. She was only a few centimeters away from his attack, but the force of the vacuum it left behind exploded and sent her body reeling. When she finally came to a halt close to her own sword, she quickly grabbed it by the hilt and held it at head height. In spite of her has.no. Kame, Naruto's smile grew a little more as she reminisced about her time spent learning Kenjutsu under Mifune's 1-on-1 instruction. The people of Magnolia Town were drawn to the spectacular fight, but Fairy Tail was too preoccupied with seeing Erza's head handed to her to notice it. A highly eccentric reporter was shouting, "This is so cool! What a cool fight!" among these inquisitive onlookers. This was Jason, a reporter for Sorcerer magazine who was enamored with the stars. The fight caught him off guard because he had just arrived at the Fairy Tail Guild to try to get an interview. The sight of a young man who could match Erza move for move startled him. He snapped a few decent photos and started running back to Sorcerer magazine's headquarters, yelling, "Cool! A powerful new mage," over and over. Lucy became alert. As she looked around distractedly, she asked, "Did anyone hear anything strange just now?" Levi McGarden, her blue-haired guild mate, merely shook her head beside her. Lucy shrugged and looked back at the magnificent fight before them. Naruto's fight with Erza initially appeared to be a stunning and captivating dance, but to the seasoned observer, Erza was losing this deadly game of conflicting wills and was having difficulty keeping up. The two of them disappeared in a flash of speed as metal collided with metal and sparks flew. The clashing swords were reduced to blurs, and the shrieks of metal grinding against metal replaced them, and the battle's tempo abruptly increased. The entire audience had to put earplugs in an effort to protect their hearing due to the deafening noise. This sound reminded Gray Fullbuster of the collective shrieking of birds, he thought. Sparks appeared between the dueling swords like fireflies blinking lights and vanished as swiftly as the light danced across the two clashing blades, like firecrackers exploding in the dead of night. This demonstration of unadulterated speed and power left Fairy Tail speechless. They could hear the reverberating, continuous clashing of blades. As the blades sliced through the air, they could feel the wind rushing through the space created by their attacks. They could see deep gouges from sword strokes that had missed each other and instead tore deep furrows into the ground, as well as craters in the road from the sheer force of Erza and Naruto landing on the ground with monstrous force and leaping high into the air with equal strength. They feared that there would be another Erza around to frighten them to death. The fight's extreme violence and ferocity astounded Natsu, who was equally excited about his impending battle with Naruto. Happy was terrified, since Naruto was clearly stronger and more fearsome than Erza was, and she could already pummel Natsu into the ground even if she was at her worst. Naruto appeared capable of unintentionally killing Natsu if he were enraged. Though he believed that facing the blonde titan would be a death wish, Gray also desired to battle Naruto. Despite her fear, Lucy respected Naruto because she knew he could test Erza's limits. She even believed that they would be a wonderful couple. She smiled, a cunning plan taking shape in her mind. Later, she would ask Mirajane for assistance and file it away. She was unaware that Mirajane shared Lucy's cunning scheme. Fairy Tail's master, Makarov Drayar, was calculating and analytical in the face of Naruto's stunning performance. A rare mindset for him. I never imagined that he would be strong enough to play with Erza in this way, but I did think that he might be able to get her to a draw. His physical strength is already an order of magnitude greater than his so-called jutsu, and he hasn't even used any yet. How strong are his people really? Their faces were a study in contrast as the two continued to clash swords. Naruto was avoiding Erza's enraged swipes while grinning as though he had just won a lottery. Titania from Fairy Tail, on the other hand, had a murderous look on her face, as though she would kill her opponent with the yellow hair. Still, she was grinning to herself. Fighting had never been so much fun for her. She still didn't understand him, even though she had found her equal in combat. Why would he want to date me? She pondered absently. When Naruto called out to her, "Okay, Benihime-chan, I think that this is enough for today. What say you? We finish this with one last move." She then awoke from her battle haze. Erza nodded silently, panting from the sheer strain of the battle, her lungs sucking in as much fresh air as they could. Her stamina was running low, and she was shocked to learn that Naruto was also worn out, as evidenced by the fact that his breathing had become a little more labored. Their bodies were wailing for relief at this point, having been fighting for the previous 2 hours. Panting, she nodded and said, "Okay. Okay, Naruto, one last charge." Sheathing his katana in its scabbard, he nodded. As they approached one another, they evaluated the person who was just 20 feet away from them. After that, they both assumed a kenjutsu stance. Erza mimicked her opponent by lowering her openings and strengthening her defense by sliding her sword behind her in a waki game, while Naruto resumed his Batojutsu stance. An eternity seemed to pass between the two of them. Elfman used this to whisper to Kana about the long standing and genuinely masculine custom of the last kenjutsu charge, but she didn't like what he had to say. The tension was high. The wind increased just as she was about to slug him, sending a leaf flying between Erza and Naruto as they faced each other. They both charged at each other, shouting incoherently as the leaf hit the ground. As Naruto yelled, "Uzumaki Kenjutsu! Ryu, Rasen Shinkugiri," he drew his katana and slashed it horizontally at Erza. Erza screamed, "Kureha, Gessen," as her sword swung out in a destructive cross of cutting power. The two of them were standing where their opponent had just been standing after a bright flash of light and a sizable explosion. With their swords parallel to the ground, they faced each other. Time seemed to stop for 5 painful seconds. Tension over the result was high, and everyone in the audience held their breath. About 5 minutes into Erza's epic sword fight with Naruto, someone started taking bets on the fight, and a lot of people stood up to clean up the results. Then it took place. Erza fell forward, trying to stop herself from falling entirely by driving her sword into the ground. A black sports bra and boy shorts shielded her modesty as the entire suit of armor abruptly developed crisscrossed white lines that grew longer until they reached each other just before the entire thing collapsed and vanished. Her dark brown eyes grew wide as she collapsed to her hands and knees, feeling blood seeping down her back and torso. Even as other people started fighting over their wins and or losses, the perverts in the crowd passed out with spontaneous bloody noses. With a loud click, Naruto sheathed his katana into its scabbard and wiped away any blood he might have collected by swabbing his sword on his shirt sleeve. Erza fainted and collapsed as if on cue, but Naruto crossed 20 feet in an instant to catch her before she hit the ground. As he laid her on his lap, he saw that her torso had a long, shallow cut that was bleeding recently. With a sigh, he lifted his hands and dipped them in the green flames of medical chakra. He then hovered over the single wound on her lower back and the 2 light wounds on her belly. Her wound healed itself and left no visible scar under the majesty of medical chakra. Even though Naruto had not used nearly as much of his normal strength to create this Rasen Shinkugiri, he was still able to produce a vacuum blade that almost sliced Erza in 2 at the waist. He would have killed her without a doubt if he hadn't taken care to prevent his katana from actually touching her body. Nevertheless, it was to her advantage that she had forced him to use such a potent tactic. There was no denying that she was incredibly strong and skilled. It would likely be sufficient to challenge Killer Bee or even Iron Country's samurai in a kenjutsu match. She was wearing little more than a tomboy's version of women's underwear, and he was struggling to keep from blushing as he healed her. He took her in his arms and carried her to her fellow guild members, much like a bride on her wedding day. She was grinning at him, but he was unaware of it. The residents of Fairy Tail, who had frozen earlier, rushed to see how she was doing. Anger over the fact that he had harmed her started to rise amid the general shouting and chatting. Makarov roared, "Shut up, you idiots!" to diffuse the tension. "She's just sleeping now, Mira. Chan, could you come up here and take Erza to her room?" "Of course, master," said Mira Jane, the demon of Fairy Tail, with a smile. The small man looked over at Naruto. "An excellent fight, Naruto-kun," he said. "So, do you still want to join Fairy Tail?" Naruto grinned. "I think that I'm going to like joining up with you lunatics," he laughed. As the rest of Fairy Tail whooped and cheered, largely applauding his choice, Makarov threw back his head and laughed hysterically. Monday, August 7th, X784 Makarov had admitted Erza to the guild following their altercation. The old man started as they conversed in private on the 2nd floor. "Naruto, I know that there's more to your story than what you've told me. But, almost everyone here is running from a dark past, so I won't ask. Naruto let out a sigh. Thank you, old man. Trusting you or the guild isn't the problem, but rather. Makarov beckoned him away. I said that there's no need for you to explain yourself, Naruto. Nevertheless, we're a guild built on trust, friendship, and loyalty, so you might want to consider talking about yourself at some point in the future. Then he scowled. I also need to talk to you about your strength and rank, he continued. Fighting Erza outside just now, that definitely didn't show me everything that you could do. You're stronger than she is, and she's an S-class mage. Beating her the way you did, on so many occasions, you're definitely S-class. You might be even stronger than Laxus, Mistogen, or even Guildarts. Naruto questioned, are they the strongest mages here after you? The old man had mentioned those three, he had noticed. Fairy Tail's elderly master gave a nod. After me, Fairy Tail's strongest include Guildarts Clive, then my grandson Laxus, and then Mistogen. You'll meet them later, anyways. In any case, Naruto, you're already beyond any bog. Standard S-class mage. I'll have to classify you as S-class soon, but I have to test you for a couple of weeks with normal requests and jobs first. Naruto gave a nod. He said, whatever's best, old man, which caused the small guild master to smile. Listen up, idiots. Do fairies really have tails? Do they even exist? Like them, this place is an eternal mystery, a never-ending adventure. The trials and tribulations of life make us who and what we are. For that, we must grow and move forward onto a new day, every day. Makarov yelled as he leapt to stand on the railing of the second-floor balcony. The other members of the guild gestured behind him as Naruto approached the small elderly man from behind and rested his forearms on the railing. Makarov bellowed loudly, and everyone applauded his commands. Now, let's welcome our newest member, Naruto Uzumaki. Let's drink to his health, Makarov said. The friendly greeting from the other guild members made Naruto smile. They're really energetic, aren't they? Once Makarov left the guild hall for some business, a brawl erupted between several members. Naruto moved fluidly between the combatants, avoiding kicks, punches, and even flying individuals. Naruto-san, where would you like to have our mark? The white-haired girl asked him as he approached Mirajane. A mug appeared out of nowhere and shot straight for her head as Naruto reached for her. Well, I'd like to have it on my right shoulder in black. Mirajane. Chan, he said, catching it without even glancing at it. She scowled a little. Naruto-san, please call me Mira like everyone does. You're one of us now. Then feel free to call me Naruto, or even Naruto-kun if you must, the blonde shinobi mused. Calling me Naruto-san makes me feel old. She chirped, okay, Naruto-kun. Here you go, as she perked up. Thank you, Mira. Chan, can I ask you something? Yes? Do you know a piece of land that I can buy? Somewhere close to the guild? As a matter of fact, I do. Why do you ask, Naruto-kun? His shrug was broad. As you know, I used to be a nomad, he said. But now that I've joined Fairy Tail, I have to have somewhere to live, don't I? Oh, that's right. We don't have a male dormitory anymore, she thought. Then she grabbed a piece of paper from the bar counter and wrote something on it. Okay, then, this is where you go. He thanked him with a nod and stood up to go. The demon of Fairy Tail yelled after him, get moving before Natsu challenges you. Naruto gave her a smile and waved goodbye before disappearing in a cloud of smoke that left her speechless. Was that a spell that made you teleport? Shouting, Mira. Chan. Where's that super strong sword guy at? Natsu approached Mirajane. She grinned and said, oh, you mean Naruto-kun? You just missed him. He left to do something important. Natsu asked her gravely, Mira. Chan, what is he if he's not a mage? Mirajane remarked icily, Naruto-kun is a shinobi, a ninja of singular capacity. She cautioned the fire dragon slayer, don't fight him, Natsu, because he's powerful too. You've seen him defeat Erza and you still can't defeat her. Natsu exclaimed, a ninja? You mean, he's a real ninja? Like the ones that I've heard about? Happy made a ram sign with his paws and exclaimed, he looks like a real ninja to me, Natsu. Nin. That's so cool, Happy Nin. But I still want to fight him now. Natsu whined, forming the same seal. Happy, giggling as usual, cried out, He'll beat you faster than anything Erza could do, Natsu. While holding a fish in his mouth. Natsu snarled and pursued Happy, saying, "What? Why you?" Mira-Jane pondered absently out loud, "I wonder what Naruto-kun is up to." A kilometer west of Fairy Tail headquarters, Naruto was inspecting the land he had acquired and grinned when he realized he had found exactly what he was looking for. He was still taken aback by this location, though. They only requested the payment money, and purchasing the land was simple. However, he did wind up spending more money than he had anticipated. He did, however, make an upfront, cash payment. The landowners were even kind enough to tell him about every detail of the land, and they even asked him if he needed a contractor for whatever he was building there. Refusing, he said he would construct the house himself. In an attempt to shake off unpleasant memories, he even found himself wishing that he had been raised in Fury rather than the elemental nations. He approached the edge of the piece of land he now owned and made sure he was alone by checking to see if anyone else was there. "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he said calmly, moving his hands into a familiar hand seal. As soon as 50 clones showed up, they began preparing the area for construction by mowing the grass and clearing away stray trees and stones. After creating 10 more clones that changed into random individuals, Naruto sent them into town to purchase the required supplies and building materials. He moved to another area of the clearing, stood there, focused his chakra, and then performed a series of hand seals before yelling, "Mokuton Hajutsu! Jukai Koden!" Huge tree roots burst from the ground, encircling one another as they rose into the sky. Green patches became bushes, which soon developed into leafy branches that eventually grew into a tree that dominated the clearing. Makarov would have remembered Tenro Island, the Fairy Tail Magic Guild's hallowed territory, and the enormous tree that served as its distinguishing characteristic if he had been present. However, Naruto collapsed to one knee as the tree reached its full height, gasping in surprise at the amount of chakra he had expended. "I have definitely gone soft," he muttered as he unsteadily stood up. With a sigh, he gestured to the 50 Kage Bunshin who were standing close by. They saluted him, inhaled deeply, and then exhaled it as a massive and focused quantity of futon chakra, which they then applied to the kunai in their right hands. After enhancing their weapons with futon Shinkujinto, they approached the enormous tree and started chopping off large portions of it. After giving a nod, Naruto disappeared in Shunshin no Jutsu and returned to Fairy Tail headquarters. Everyone was shocked into silence when Naruto materialized in front of the bar in a cloud of smoke. Natsu and Happy were shouting something about how awesome his entrance was as he approached Mira-Jane, who was once again in charge of the bar. Naruto exclaimed, "Yo, Mira-chan," to the white-haired girl with a smile. "I've been meaning to ask you about available missions or jobs around here. I could use some spending money and I'm bored." She pointed to a bulletin board that he had not previously noticed while giggling. "You take something from the request board. You also can do it solo or as a team." Naruto was about to respond when he raised his hand and used just one finger to block a fist that was headed for his head. He turned to see a boy with pink hair who had just attempted to attack him. "Now why'd you go and do that, you little brat?" he said, frowning. Natsu winced. He was actually afraid of the blonde young man because he looked so much like Erza. Even more terrifying than Erza was Naruto. His body was suddenly overcome by a malevolent and oppressive force that brought him to his knees. The pink-haired fire dragon slayer was able to look up, and when he saw a horned black Hanya mask materialize above Naruto's head, his eyes widened. The mask featured a pair of purple eyes with 3 circles on each circle that extended from crimson pupils. From behind closed lips with a misty black aura escaping its confines, 2 ivory white fangs protruded from its lower jaw. Everybody in the guild hall was in danger of being strangled by the murderous intent that paralyzed Natsu as he faced a terrifying image. When the blonde shinobi said, "Don't try that again, brat," it was extremely cold. The words, "I'd really hate having to break my foot off in your ass after I finish kicking it all over the place," made everyone in the guild hall shiver. The level declaration that promised so much pain made even Gray, who had trained in extremely cold conditions, shudder. Mira-Jane was flushed and experiencing a chill that heated her body and sent shivers down her spine. She felt giddy and innocent, and her heart was pounding. That was really evil and awesome, she squealed to herself. "I believe I've fallen in love." I can't decide whether to set him up with Erza or just take him for myself because I'm so attracted to and disturbed by this deliciously evil and wicked aura," she laughed. "Natsu, please apologize now," cried Happy, avoiding the strange mask. The teenager appeared to have been startled out of his fearful reverie by this, and he bowed in an unusually contrite manner. "Why yes, sir, I'm sorry, Naruto-san." Natsu's acting like Happy again. Lucy babbled in surprise. "I thought that Erza was the only one who could make him do that." The implications made Gray, Levi, and everyone else in the Guildhall shudder. When the stifling feeling of murderous intent subsided and everyone in the Guildhall began to breathe normally once more, Naruto's eyes softened. The blonde shinobi rubbed his forehead and let out a long sigh. He grunted, "It's fine, brat," he said. "What you felt was a reflex that happens when I'm suddenly attacked. What do you want?" The pink-haired fire dragon slayer yelled. "Hey, my name is Natsu, Natsu Dragneel, and you'd better remember it," which made everyone calm down once more. Naruto chuckled with nostalgia. He said, "Oh, well, I'm sorry, Natsu Dragneel," with a friendly tone. "I forgot that even animals have names. But you still haven't told me what you want from me." The sudden change in Naruto's behavior caused the fairies to whisper to one another. They were aware that Natsu would soon issue a challenge to a duel with the shinobi. "Naruto, I challenge you to a fight," Natsu declared with assurance. The blonde shinobi surprised everyone once more by shrugging. "Okay," he said. The dragon slayer with the pink hair sputtered, "Oh, come on, I want to fig." "Okay? Really?" I said. No one in Fairy Tail had ever welcomed his challenges with such openness. Naruto questioned, "Master, would you mind if you judge our fight?" He sighed, "Fine, fine," frightening the living daylights out of everyone in the Guildhall because no one had witnessed him return from his errand. "But let's go behind the guild. That way we won't destroy too much stuff." As Natsu and Happy rushed out of the Guildhall, Naruto nodded and vanished in a cloud of smoke. There was a minute of silence in the Guildhall. A stampede immediately broke out as everyone rushed for the front door after Elfman interrupted, saying, "I don't know about you guys, but seeing Natsu getting his ass kicked by a real man like Naruto should be quite a show." Naruto was already facing Natsu when they eventually made their way out back. The pink-haired fire dragon slayer was grinning cockily, and the blonde shinobi appeared unusually composed. Between them stood Master Makarov. "Okay, now are you kids ready? Go." "We fight with our bodies and techniques, Natsu-chan," taunted Naruto. "Are you ready?" Natsu yelled, "Okay, then, hey," as Naruto leapt back. Natsu growled, "Now you've really pissed me off." His cheeks swelled up like a balloon as he inhaled deeply and blasted Naruto with a huge stream of fire. "Take this, Karyu no Hoko," he exclaimed. Grinning at the enormous ball of doom that was about to devour him, Naruto lifted an eyebrow. He disregarded his new friend's cries for him to move aside and disappeared in the ensuing pyrotechnic explosion. Everyone fell silent in shock. The rest of the group, including Lucy, Happy, Natsu, and others, were concerned about their new friend. When they heard a familiar voice calling out to them, they abruptly stopped their plans to go check on him. Naruto moaned, "Hey, what's the matter? You're acting like you're mourning some poor bastard's death." Naruto was standing behind them, reading a book, when they all turned around. He waved absently at them, looking up at them. "Yo." Everyone fell on their hands and knees at his casual manner. Lucy was the initial person to inquire, "How did he get behind Natsu so fast? I didn't even see him move. Only that Natsu's attack him. Wait, what exactly is he reading?" Gray was the first to hypothesize, maybe it is his magic? Makarov was as surprised as his subordinates. He told himself, so this is a jutsu. What else can he do? Naruto responded, "This isn't magic," to his fellow guild members. They turned to see the remains of a severely burned log as he pointed behind them and said, "I'm not a mage, remember? So I can't do magic in the way that you guys do. What I just showed you is called jutsu. Ninjutsu, if I'm being specific." The blonde shinobi lectured, "I escaped Natsu's attack by using a basic ninjutsu. That log is generally used in Kawarimi no Jutsu, a very basic ninjutsu in which one replaces their own body with a block of wood, or some other object, when an attack lands on them. This creates an optical illusion that makes the enemy think that their attack was successful. The user can use this brief lapse in the enemy's attention to either attack or flee the battlefield. Even Makarov was taken aback when Fairy Tail started speaking softly to one another. Someone could avoid a fatal blow and escape unscathed thanks to such a technique. He could only lament that no magical form of such a practical skill had ever been created. To be sure, Mirajane had never heard of this method. She gazed intently at Naruto. Only now, after glancing at his body so blatantly, did she notice his power. Unexpectedly, she wondered why he hadn't employed this tactic against Erza during their battle earlier in the day. As if he knew what she was thinking, Naruto said, "The reason that I didn't use this move while fighting Erza earlier today was because she always challenges me as a swordswoman and I accepted it as a swordsman. In a duel of swords, I never use anything but sword technique unless my opponent does." He grinned widely as he turned to face Mirajane. After he caught her staring at him like he was a piece of meat, heat shot up her cheeks, and she was unable to look at him. He turned back to Natsu, laughing at himself for giving the white-haired young woman her retribution. The blonde shinobi teased, "Natsu-chan, you're not the only one here who can do that. I'll show you my version, Kaden Gokakyu no Jutsu." He exhaled and let his cheeks swell as he made a series of hand seals with his hands. Exhaling abruptly, a stream of flame swiftly expanded into a fireball the size of a house, which crashed into Natsu and exploded with great force. The blast reminded everyone there of Fire Dragon Slayer magic, but it was different. These flames appeared to be somehow controlled and burned with a far higher heat than anything the pink-haired fire mage had ever controlled. However, they were also aware of Natsu's fire resistance. Mirajane had considered warning Naruto about that, but she had dismissed her concerns since she had never imagined that he was also capable of creating and controlling fire. With some concern, Naruto said out loud, "Oh, shit, is he all right? I only meant to scare him. I didn't think that he'd take that attack head-on." Naruto raised an eyebrow curiously as Mirajane and the others laughed. He urged, "What's so funny?" "Oh, nothing, really," the fairy tale demon chuckled. "I just thought about the look on your face when you see it." Then he demanded, "See what?" She merely pointed to the huge conflagration he had started and smiled at him without saying or doing anything else. When he realized, his eyes widened in surprise. As if nothing had happened, that brat Natsu was still standing there, eating the flames. Before Naruto realized what he was witnessing, he had to strike himself in the head. This child was consuming the burning remnants of his strong fireball jutsu as though they were a rare treat. The child is not only a fire user, but he can also eat flames and is immune to them. Hold on a second. That gives him more power. Ah, shit, swore Naruto. Natsu exclaimed, "Thank you for the meal." With joy. "Your fire is the most delicious flames that I've ever eaten. It's so full of life and energy that I'm all revved up." He looked to Mirajane for clarification because he had no idea what had just transpired. How can he do that? She gave a small smile. "Oh, you don't know? Natsu uses Ka no Metsuryu Maho, or Fire Dragon Slayer magic. He was taught by his foster parent, Igneel the Fire Dragon." After a moment to process that information, Naruto had a question. Why would a dragon teach its own adoptive child a type of magic that would kill it? He was disregarded by everyone. He remained silent despite twitching at their response. Natsu ran up to him at full speed, pulling his arm back for a punch while his right fist was engulfed in flames. Karyu no Tekken. But to the astonishment of both himself and everyone else, Naruto made some extremely rapid hand motions. As he yelled, "Suijin! Suijinheki!" His torso grew larger once more. He then threw up a thick stream of water that blocked Natsu's Karyu no Tekken and created a tremendous burst of steam when the fire fist and the water wall collided. As Natsu lost focus and succumbed to the overwhelming tidal force of the watery barrier, the flame quickly drained away. He sputtered and looked around, angry and soaked. Where did that bastard go? Naruto appeared out of the dense cloud of steam behind Natsu, almost as if to answer his question. He was warned by his friends, but it was too late. The blonde shinobi rasped, "Behind you," and then yelled, "Suijin! Suiro no Jutsu!" The steam and vapor from his previous technique suddenly came together as thick watery tendrils around Natsu's body. The water appeared to expand in a heartbeat. then swiftly closed around the Fire Dragon Slayer's body, trapping him inside a gigantic ball of water. When Natsu attempted to move, the water felt thick and heavy. As he gasped for air where none existed, darkness pulled at the periphery of his vision. He watched as Naruto approached him and made contact with the ball. He even heard Naruto say, "You lose, Natsu," just before the fire mage with the pink hair fainted. Naruto snatched Natsu by the jacket lapels, slung the unconscious Fire Dragon Slayer over his shoulder like a bag of potatoes, and then dumped his body at Makarov's feet, dispersing the water prison bubble. Naruto smiled and asked, "So, Master, did you like my ninjutsu fighting style? You've only just scratched the surface of what I can really do with this ability." The elderly man grinned. Laughing, he said, "Oh, there's no need, Naruto. All that's left for me to see is your action report of the requests that you take before I make you an S-class mage here." With everyone else following him and discussing their newest member's terrifying power, Naruto grinned as he made his way back to the guild hall. After approaching the request board, the blonde shinobi took 3 requests that he liked and that were all located in Magnolia Town, then handed them to Mirajane. The first was a monster south of town. The second was a request for gardening, and the last was a mail delivery to Enfram Harjin Town. He took 3 jobs instead of 1, which surprised her. Naruto.kun, why did you take 2 more requests? She blushed when he smiled at her. Ma, I'm going to get bored if I did jobs 1 at a time. I'll even finish all 3 of them in an hour, just to challenge myself." She was shocked that he could respond to her so casually, but she knew that if he could somehow look left and right at the same time, he could complete all 3 tasks in that amount of time. He most likely had a jutsu that could accomplish that, since he knew him. With a cheerful smile, she said, "Okay. Then, Naruto.kun. Whatever you want. But don't bite more than you can chew." Naruto laughed as she wrote down his requests, then retracted the slips and vanished in a huge smoke explosion. With a longing sigh, the demon of Fairy Tail asked, "How does he do that?" Monday, August 17th, X784 Olive Fury was talking about Naruto 10 days after he joined Fairy Tail. He completed his first 3 job requests in precisely 45 minutes, which is when the rumors began. However, he chose to fulfill another set of requests rather than take a break and unwind. His speed and the fact that he completed all of those jobs without receiving any complaints or causing any property damage shocked Mirajane. He quickly received 2 cognomina from the magic world that had completely different meanings. His nicknames began when he was featured in an issue of Sorcerer magazine, just 3 days after he had joined Fairy Tail. The magazine went so far as to call him the Demon King of Fairy Tail, which increased subscriptions, but it did nothing to quell public interest. His destruction of a dark guild that had been secretly holding a small town hostage, abducting its residents, and selling them as slaves served as the basis for their argument. Naruto became involved when he went into the main tavern in the small town to get some refreshments and was almost knocked down by a young girl who ran into the bar and started crying. She rushed to her father, the bartender, and informed him that the Dark Guild had abducted her mother and older sister. Being a good man, Naruto asked if he could assist. Despite his doubts, the bartender was appreciative of Naruto's offer of help and gave him the address of the Dark Guild's headquarters. The villagers eagerly followed him to watch him engage in combat. Instead, they witnessed him merely freezing the Dark Guild mages in place with a single, fleeting glance. But in a fit of wrath, he beat the Dark Mages to within an inch of their lives after witnessing the state of the abducted women and children there. While he had beaten every last one of those Dark Mages bloody, the blonde shinobi had somehow been creating a thick and heavy air of oppressive killer intent amid the sheer brutality of his rage. The Dark Mages were screaming about a demon as he beat them bloody, as though they had seen something the villagers couldn't. Naruto, for his part, frightened all of the recently liberated villagers while grinning icily as he beat them senseless. After he had rendered the Dark Mages unconscious, he released the captured villagers from their cages and immediately replaced them with the mages he had just rendered unconscious. Just before he left their village, the young girl and her family caught up with him and expressed their gratitude for all that he had done for them. Just as the Rune Knights arrived in the village to maintain order, he left the town. Because of his strength, commanding presence, and the vicious beating he had inflicted on those Dark Mages, the villagers dubbed him the Demon King. Fury residents took the moniker seriously, but they were shocked to hear that he had joined the renowned Magic Guild Fairy Tail. The moniker, Demon King of Fairy Tail, had been created, but he wasn't known for being destructive, not at all like the extensive property damage that Fairy Tail tended to leave behind. Ironically, he recognized their second nickname, which was the Yellow Flash of Fairy Tail, which was derived from his dazzling blonde hair and lightning fast speed. He had earned the moniker after accepting a crucial delivery assignment that required him to work at full capacity to finish on schedule. The passengers of a local train, which included another reporter from Sorcerer magazine, saw him run by the train, and actually outrun it, in an incredible show of speed and stamina. Since Naruto was the most recent of his most well-known mages to perform their duties without suffering any significant collateral damage, Makarov was happy. The guild also had a positive reputation thanks to his reputation. The blonde shinobi set a guild record in his first week at Fairy Tail by completing over 30 job requests by himself. Fairy Tail received more requests and jobs as a result of his exceptional performance. The blonde's refusal to participate in any interviews was Makarov's only significant grievance with Naruto. He would disappear in an instant when confronted in public, leaving an astonished interviewer and her team in his wake. Overall, though, Naruto was the ideal mage. He performed his duties flawlessly, followed orders to the letter, and attracted more customers as a result of people's desire to witness his incredible speed and strength. At the same time, Naruto was destroying the lunch Mirajane had prepared for him on the first floor of the Fairy Tail Guild Hall. He let out a sigh. He needed something more thrilling because the jobs at the guild were so simple. Mirajane asked him, "What's with the long face, Naruto-kun?" after he let out another bored sigh. He raised his gaze to her. He didn't exactly complain when he said, "I haven't seen Benihime-chan in a while, and I'm bored of these simple job requests. I've missed her, challenging me to fights." She gave him a smile. "Why don't you talk to the master about giving you an S-class job? You're an S-class mage already. He might just give you one." Naruto grinned. "You're right, Mira-chan, I think I'll talk with the old coot. He did mention that I'd be allowed to do that, after all. I guess I must have forgotten." As he stood up and went to the master's office, she laughed. Makarov, meanwhile, was up in his office considering how he could fairly promote Naruto to S-class while still treating the other mages fairly. He held the traditional S-class mage promotion trial in the first place because S-class mages were superior to ordinary mages in terms of strength and skill. He didn't want to lose a very strong mage who could complete more than 30 missions in a week, but that was still 5 months away. What if I assign him an S-class mission and an S-class mage assesses his level and skill throughout the mission? I check the results when they return to see if he's ready to be S-class, he thought to himself. I'm not saying he isn't, but who should I send with him? A knock on his office door rudely jolted him out of his reverie. Ironically, the object of his musing entered after he yelled, "Come in protest of the rowdy kids bothering him. Naruto shrugged and said, "I'm sorry to bother you, master, but I need to talk to you." "What did you want to talk about, my boy?" the master asked, nodding toward a chair. Naruto coughed and cleared his throat. "I need your permission to do an S-class mission. The jobs for the rank and file are below my standards, and, well, if I'm honest, I'm getting bored. So I came to see if you could allow me to perform an S-class job." Naruto raised an eyebrow in interest as the old master laughed. "I was actually thinking about that, my boy. Here's the deal. I'll give you the job, and you can even choose any of the available S-class jobs that you want to go on, but there's a condition that you'll have to fulfill." "Which is?" inquired Naruto. "I know that you like to do a mission solo, but in order to evaluate your skill with said missions, I must send an S-class mage along with you," Makarov replied. "Even if they're weaker than you, Naruto, they'll still have more experience with S-class missions, so their assessments will go a long way towards your S-class certification." Naruto gave a nod. He not only recognized Makarov's point of view, but his logic also made him think of the long-dead Sarutobi. He gave a firm nod. "Master, I formally request that you appoint Erza Scarlet as my partner for this mission. She may be one of the 2 S-class mages that I've met here in Fairy Tail next to Mira-chan, but Mira-chan's fighting spirit is practically non-existent." The master nodded and sighed. Naruto was correct, but he wouldn't have had anything to say about Mirajane's previous tragedies if she hadn't told him about the specifics of that day. "All right, then. Erza will be back later today, so talk to her about this." Naruto turned to go, nodding. Then he turned around and said, "Thank you for trusting me, master." Makarov gave a small smile. "Naruto, you deserve this. You've long since proven yourself to be a great mage and you're a decent person. After all, you haven't let your power go to your head. I just hope that my grandson Laxus could learn something from you. Besides, you're part of Fairy Tail now, practically one of my children. As a parent, I have an obligation and duty to trust and help my children." The man's words stunned Naruto. He was raised as an orphan and had only ever heard those words through his parents' sealed imprints in the seal containing Kurama, the Kyuubi no Yoko. The thought of having a parent made him smile, and he left Makarov's office wearing that dejected grin. Naruto waited for Erza for an hour. They would set out on their mission as soon as she arrived. As planned, she walked into the guild hall with Team Natsu members, who grinned at him. Erza ignored Naruto as he stood up to greet his fellow guild members, which only made him smile. "Look, you guys, I've got an important job and I need Benihime-chan for a bit." Team Natsu turned to face Erza, who for some reason was unsure whether to kill Naruto or give him a hug. Sometimes he got under her skin easily. Her eyebrow twitched in repressed rage as she glanced at him and nodded in response to his half-hearted bow and smirk. "Look, Benihime-chan, I need you to evaluate me on an S-class mission before I get promoted to S-class. You can even talk to Master about it if you want." Her gaze expanded. Despite his immense power, Naruto was a relatively new guild member. It was unheard of to be promoted to S-class so fast. She had faith in Makarov's wisdom and that he would act in the guild's best interests despite her personal reservations. "All right, Naruto-kun, let me confirm with Master and we can go on this mission." Rising, she approached the Master's office. With a thin smile, Naruto gazed at Erza's bouncing derriere and swaying hips. Jealousy began to seep into Mirajane's thoughts as she coughed into the small of her hand. She muttered to herself, "Men," as Naruto turned to face her and smiled slickly. "So, did Master accept your idea, Naruto-kun?" The blonde shinobi shrugged, barely glancing at her. "Actually, he did," he said. "Thanks to you, actually, but he said that the evaluation would be the last test I'd take before I could be called an S-class mage." "I'm glad to hear that, but be careful. As you know, S-class jobs are very dangerous," she cautioned him. She blushed once more as he turned to face her and grinned casually. With a shrug, he said, "Oh, well, that's my kind of job." Really, his smile growing into a grin. Grinning, he rose from his chair and ascended the second story stairs. As he made his way to the S-class job board, the guild members looked on in silence. In a flash of light, he made his way back to his seat with an S-class request poster in hand, surprising many of the people there who had never seen him do that before, including Team Natsu. "Naruto, how did you do that?" "A star-eyed Natsu asked him as they gasped in amazement at his speed. Happy repeated, Naruto, how did you do that?" Inquisitive, Gray and Lucy secretly listened in on the impending reaction. Naruto closed his eyes and grinned. Did you say something?" he asked, leaning back in his chair and looking at the four of them for a minute or two. Naturally, they all fell to the ground in frustration as Naruto and Mira laughed at their bad luck. Erza returned about that time. She looked at him sternly and evaluatingly, and Naruto studied her. At last, she responded, "Master said that I'm to go with you and evaluate your level of skill. So which request did you take and when do we leave?" She accepted the request after he showed it to her with a smile. "Wanted, Argus. A rare variety of T-Rex located in the prehistoric forest," she read out loud. She raised an eyebrow as she looked up from the piece of paper and said, "Payment will be 9 million jewels for its capture upon successful delivery to the dinosaur park. Are you sure that you want this mission, Naruto?" He nodded and grinned arrogantly in response, as though to reassure her that the work would be easy. He ignored Natsu's outburst about doing S-class jobs in a rare show of tact. Lucy and Happy appeared astonished. Naruto was going to do an S-class job before them, even though they had been at Fairy Tail for a lot longer than he had. Gray remained composed. He was aware that, despite not yet being S-class, Naruto was unquestionably the most formidable mage in their small group. Erza gave the request to Mirajane with a firm nod, and she pulled out the request reference book, noting that Erza and Naruto were taking on the dinosaur park task. "All right, then, Naruto, we'll be going now, so get ready to leave." "I have to go pack," the red-headed swordswoman said, turning back to face the blonde shinobi. Natsu gaped in surprise as Naruto smirked and gave Erza a mocking salute before disappearing in a burst of yellow light. How the hell does he do that? That's so cool, he exclaimed. After a few minutes, Naruto emerged in his battlesuit in the guild hall. A black shirt with long sleeves, a black jacket with a hood, and vambraces on his forearms were his favorite outfit. He also wore black cargo pants with graves on his lower legs and steel-capped leather ankle boots on his feet. Mirajane was quick to notice that he was sitting in his usual chair. "Era, ready already, Naruto-kun?" He gave a nod. He shrugged and walked to the door as Natsu and the others turned to Mirajane. "All I've got to do now is to wait for Benihime-chan outside." "Later, everyone," he said. Lucy inquired. "Mira-san, did Naruto-san and Erza take a job together?" "Yes, they did," grinned Mirajane, "but they've taken an S-class job." Natsu exclaimed, "I want to do an S-class mission too, Mira-chan," with excitement. Happy said in a squeaky, humorous voice. Lucy listened to what she had just heard and just stared. "But, Mira-san, isn't Naruto-san a bit new to receive an S-class job?" she inquired. "He's only been with the guild for 10 days and yet he's already received an S-class mission. Isn't that strange, Mira-san?" "Master knows what's best for our guild," the former fairy tale demon shrugged. "Everyone knows that Naruto's ridiculously powerful. Look at how he finished his jobs. He's very experienced and has effectively displayed an ability to do much higher level jobs. So please stop. Master's word is final." Natsu was about to complain, but he stopped himself when he noticed Mirajane's scowl. Although they were aware of Naruto's extraordinary power, Gray and Lucy were still a little taken aback. The evidence was that he had defeated Erza and Natsu in battle. They were therefore left to speculate as to what he and Erza were doing at this point. Naruto, meanwhile, was waiting for his partner outside the guild hall. After a few minutes, he approached Erza after noticing her distinctive scarlet hair. It was only then that he realized she was towing a big handcart full of various suitcases and bags. He initially believed them to be full of clothing, but he was compelled to change his mind after recalling her magic. The aroma of food filled his nostrils as he approached her. Well, a woman that knows her way around the kitchen and also a strong and powerful warrior. He laughed at her. "My kind of woman, really." She became very flushed. She stumbled defensively. I don't know what you're talking about," she said. She blushed even more when he grinned and laughed a little. She scowled as she turned her head away from him and began to make her way to the train station. Before realizing she had left, Naruto was still giggling. "Hey, Benihime-chan, I was just fooling around. Wait for me," he yelled as he chased after her. Tuesday, August 18th, X784. Apart from the fact that Naruto and Erza were constantly making jokes and flirting quite skillfully, the trip to the prehistoric forest was uneventful. Naruto was enraged that the train ride took a full day to reach their destination, since he could have arrived in 12 hours if he had been running non-stop. To Erza's surprise, Naruto had hidden her luggage in a storage fuinjutsu scroll to make things easier. She had underestimated the versatility of his special form of magic, which he called ninjutsu. It was their responsibility to transport a rare dinosaur to Dinosaur Park from the old forest. Naruto stopped them just before they entered the forest. Erza raised an eyebrow in uncertainty as he grinned at her. After a certain hand seal, he yelled, "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," and 100 shadow clones emerged in a smoke explosion before fleeing into the forest. "I'd like to finish this job in record time, so..." Knowing that Erza would be taken aback by yet another demonstration of ninjutsu and its various uses, he turned around with a smile. "That was just one of my many techniques, Benihime-chan, so breathe deeply, and let yourself process what you've just seen." She took a deep breath despite her blush. Pointing to the forest, he said, "That was Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which allows me to create solid clones out of my chakra. But the technique can seriously deplete my reserves, especially since most of my people can barely make one, let alone the 100 that you just saw me manifest. But this jutsu's dead useful. I can remember anything that my clones see, hear, feel, or learn, because I'm the original and their creator." She turned to face Naruto and was taken aback by his admission that he was capable of being so exhausted. If his magic reserves are being depleted in this way, That technique must be very taxing. Perhaps it shouldn't be that much. She was intrigued when she noticed him smile at her out of the blue. Then he scowled. One of my clones just found our target, about 20 kilometers south of our location, he said. He continued, but we're not alone in this hunt. She was not surprised at how quickly he, or rather his clone, had moved. He was, after all, said to be the fastest man in Fairy Tail, if not all of Fury. Even though she wouldn't tell anyone, she was glad he had joined her guild and had even earned him his second nickname, the so-called Yellow Flash. He was the only man her age who could easily defeat her, in her opinion. Ironically, she was undecided about whether to love or hate him. He exuded a coolness that gave him the appearance of royalty. He would voice his opinions regardless of what his audience thought, but he would still get advice on topics he was ignorant of or didn't fully comprehend. He was an extremely peculiar man. He was modest despite his immense power. He was different from the majority of strong men she had encountered. In general, they were haughty peacocks who enjoyed showing off their feathered accomplishments. He spoke to everyone in the same manner, whether they were Fairy Tail members, guild members, or regular people. Even though he was only a few days old to the town and guild, he was adored by Magnolia Town residents. Because of his peculiar charm, he was easily trusted and befriended by those around him. He was a mystery, a riddle that irritated her. She would notice the sad, lonely expression in his eyes, which he would cover up with a cheerful smile. Unlike other guild members, she was unable to evoke any kind of fear in him. This incapacity, ironically, was refreshing to her. He could and would speak to her as an equal, not as someone beneath him. In addition to her and Mirajane, he would flirt with every other girl in the guild, which irritated her. His damnable smirk and sexual innuendos would make her blush. She was aware that he was attractive and that all of the girls in her guild were interested in him. He was more enigmatic than Mistogen because of his past, which he didn't discuss specifically. Despite not knowing anything about him or his history, Fairy Tail found him to be incredibly gregarious and amiable. With a sigh, she set out to follow the Wood.Bes class mage for 20 kilometers through the perilous forest. As they walked through the forest, Naruto was keeping a wary eye on the surroundings. After an hour of walking and encountering a few monsters along the way, the two of them arrived at their destination. They raised their hackles in response to the familiar and loud sound of tree trunks snapping. They heard a loud beastly roar and a few human shouts as they got closer and closer to the source of the noise. Naruto stopped Erza before she could charge in and investigate. Erza-chan, we should stick to the shadows until we understand what's going on in there, he said coolly as she glared at him, her eyes demanding an explanation. She looked away from him, trying not to blush at his familiar behavior. They strolled through the tree shadows before spotting a massive, roughly 15-meter long creature with tough, leathery, reddish, brown skin. Naruto asked Erza whether she knew him because the beast was engaged in combat with a scythe-wielding mage from a guild he was unfamiliar with. She looked at the mage for a split second before her eyes widened in shock and she gave Naruto a fierce growl that caught his attention. Finally, she harshly whispered to him, "The man with the scythe is Aragorn, from a dark guild called Eisenwald. He was the ace of that guild, but Natsu defeated him. He and several of his comrades tried to kill the masters of the legal guilds during a guild meeting about a month ago, including Master Makarov. The Rune Knights arrested all of them, but there was a report that he'd escaped. Then, using a series of harsh wind blasts, the scythe-wielding mage rendered the beast inoperable. He laughed as he captured the powerful beast. What an easy job. The money will be useful in helping Master." Naruto scowled. But before she could respond, he disappeared. "Erza, you protect that creature from further harm. I'll handle this Aragorn guy." With a sigh, she also ran to her target. The blonde shinobi appeared before Aragorn and waved merrily at him. "Yo, sorry, but you're taking my target. If you'd be so kind as to relinquish it to me, I promise you safe passage. What do you say?" Since Aragorn had never sensed Naruto, he was first taken aback by him, but this man's bold request soon infuriated him. He sneered, "Safe passage, you say? Why would I need that when I could just kill you and be on my way?" "Stormbringer," he yelled, sweeping his left arm toward Naruto, and a huge tornado roared into being. As it appeared to charge the blonde man, its imbued wind blades and torrential power crushed the nearby trees. The tornado was abruptly split in two and indiscriminately scattered. and there was the sound of a blade slicing through the air. Now that Stormbringer's power was neutralized, the dust and debris it had gathered started to fall to the ground. Erigor's mouth dropped when he realized that he had just seen one of his most powerful blows defeated. Then he heard the blonde man say casually, "This is my final warning. Leave or I'll cut you down. You know, it's not nice to attack someone who's offering you a good deal." With a long black sword in his hand and a chilly glare that sent chills down his spine, he noticed the blonde man still standing on the ground. Before Erigor could respond, he heard a voice he recognized say, "Take the deal, Erigor the Shinigami. You know that you can't beat him now, and you certainly can't beat both of us." Pale, he turned around. He was confronted by Erza Scarlet, the infamous Titania from Fairy Tail. Much to his dismay, he had just knocked out the beast, and she stood before it. "We have legal paperwork for this beast, and we don't want to fight you. Please leave peacefully." He turned to look at Naruto once more and growled, "Oh, so you're from Fairy Tail? Why do you flies always put your nose in my business? I'll leave this time, but mark my words, I will get my revenge on you and your guild." The wind grew stronger, blocking their view for a moment before clearing to show that Erigor was no longer there. Naruto and Erza approached the unconscious animal. Before Naruto stopped her, she started to pick it up. "Hey, Benihime. Chan. This job's mine. Remember? I gotta do all the work. Plus, you're just here to evaluate me?" She blushed at her error and grinned. "I'm sorry, Naruto. Please forgive me for forgetting my job during this request. Please hit me as punishment." With a gleam of evil in his eyes, Naruto grinned before giving her a single, forceful ass slap. She screamed as a startling mixture of pleasure and pain swept through her body, causing her to blush foolishly and become agitated. She screamed angrily, "What are you doing, Naruto-kun?" "What?" The blonde shinobi scowled at her, "Didn't you ask me to punish you?" She was taken aback by his intense gaze and saw lust and hunger in his deep blue eyes. He quickly suppressed his feelings, though, as his eyes showed the same loneliness and melancholy that she was all too familiar with. After turning abruptly to face the unconscious creature, he removed an empty scroll and placed it on the ground in front of the creature. As he retrieved a brush and inkwell from somewhere and started working, she stood behind him. He started writing in a strange language she had never seen before on the scroll. After completing his task in a matter of minutes, he put his tools away and then yelled, "Fuan," and made a half-ram sign. Before tendrils of energy in the same hue crept to the beast and covered its whole body, the writings on the scroll started to glow a faint blue. After a huge smoky explosion, the beast had vanished for good. There was a blank space in the middle of the scroll's writings, but now it bore an odd new symbol. Erza was taken aback by this strange magic once more. However, she had already witnessed it when Naruto had packed her bags and kept her numerous suitcases safe before opening them the night before they had checked into a hotel room. Therefore, she was not concerned about the dinosaur's well-being or any potential threat to the job's integrity. After grabbing the scroll, Naruto put it in his jacket's inner pocket and exclaimed, "We're done here. Let's go." August 19th, Wednesday, X784. Naruto and Erza had just returned from his first S-Class mission the following day, having been paid by the owner of Dinosaur Park. After months of trying to obtain the rare Argus type, the man was ecstatic. In addition to paying them more for their speed, he assured them that he would tell his friends about Fairy Tail. It barely took a day for them to return to the guild hall, with Erza riding on Naruto's back because he detested walking slowly when he didn't have to. Although she would never acknowledge it, she found the ride on his back enjoyable. She was able to touch his body and discover many specifics about his muscles. Before they could even sit down for a minute, Mirajane and Master Makarov came over. It seems that Lucy, Happy, and Natsu had taken an S-Class job without authorization. Gray had been ordered by Makarov to bring them back, but they had not yet done so. He therefore instructed Erza and Naruto to check on them and bring them back to the guild right away. Naruto was more disappointed in the children than anything else, but Erza became enraged. He was aware, however, that they would need to grow from their errors. "So, Master, where did Natsu and his friends go to?" he asked, turning to Makarov after muttering something about obnoxious brats and their foolishness. Makarov frowned hard. "The cursed island of Galuna." Now a little intrigued, Naruto repeated, "A cursed island? Why is it cursed?" Legend is that the island has the power to change people to demons because of a curse, Mirajane stated. The job asked to lift that curse from the island. Naruto inquired, how long have they been away, Mira-chan? With disappointment. They've been gone for 3 days now, Naruto-kun, Mirajane sighed. Naruto scowled as he turned to face Erza, interpreting her silence as a warning. He approached her and touched her shoulder. He was unmoved, but she flinched in place and then gave him a furious glare. Except for Makarov and Mirajane, everyone instantly recoiled at her glare, and Naruto was not impressed by Erza's actions. At last, he said, let's go get those brats back here and finish the job while we're at it. Erza snarled. She mumbled, I don't care about the job. They broke the rules of the guild and they must come back to face their punishment, that's all. Naruto's eyes grew a little softer. Don't forget your love for them just because they made a really big mistake, he said. We're only human, after all, and mistakes are what we tend to do. Naruto's words caused Erza's eyes to widen. She let out a sigh as they became softer. The guild members grinned in surprise at their newest member's candor. They were happy that the guild had at last a member who could effectively defuse Erza. Makarov merely chuckled. Well said, Naruto, he said with a laugh. Oh, and I've received some good word from the owner of that request you took. I'm proud of you, and I'd like to celebrate, but getting those brats back comes first. As of now, however, you're an S-class mage of Fairy Tail. I'll send the needed paperwork to the Magic Council in Era for registration. Erza made her way to the front door of the guild hall, and Naruto nodded and followed her. He yelled after them, one more thing, which caused them to halt and turn to face him. Please hurry, both of you. I'm worried about those reckless brats. After responding with a slack finger salute and a smile, the blonde shinobi grabbed Erza's left shoulder. The two of them disappeared almost immediately in a tiny tornado of leaves and wind. Once more, Makarov was caught off guard. How does he do that? I didn't even see him use any of those jutsu of his. Mirajane merely chuckled. That's what we're trying to figure out too, Master. Thursday, August 20th, Galuna Island, X784. It was the beginning of a brand new day that was as lovely as a day can be when you're fighting for your life. Lucy was fighting for her life on the beach against Sherry Blendy, a member of the Lamia Scale Guild, and her rock doll spell. However, Lucy's timely application of Aquarius's two-pronged giant wave attack carried her and her pink-haired opponent away in a raging stream of water that left them both dizzy and stumbling. Lucy regained her composure first, slamming Sherry to the ground with a clothesline attack that struck Sherry's neck and upper chest. Sherry summoned her enormous green pet rat, Angelica, to exact revenge on her as she was about to faint, and it did. However, neither of them could have predicted that Erza Scarlet would suddenly show up and vanquish the rat with a single cut from her Heart Crew's sword. Lucy squeaked with relief, Erza, but trailed off when she saw the redhead's frightful frown. She had never seen Erza so furious before, and she was terrified. She appeared to be glowing with rage, and Lucy recalled that she had joined Natsu and Happy in disobeying guild regulations to embark on an unapproved S-class quest. Titania from Fairy Tail had returned to punish them. To exacerbate the situation, Happy stopped by to check on her, but as soon as he got there, he saw Erza and attempted to fly away. But while holding Happy in place, Erza caught him by the tail and then shot Lucy a glare in return. Looking exactly like the queen that Sorcerer magazine had once called her, the red-headed swordswoman demanded imperiously, Lucy, do you know why I'm here? To take us back to the guild for breaking the rules? Lucy squeaked softly in an attempt to win someone over. However, the three of them were unaware that someone wearing a mask was watching them. I should inform Leon Sama of this development, it chuckled. The masked man was startled when a male voice said out loud, it's rude to spy on other people, you know, from behind him. The man in the mask gave a mocking sneer, oh, is that right? A tall man was standing on a tree branch above him when he turned around. Under a hooded black jacket, he wore a long-sleeved black shirt, black cargo pants and greaves on his lower legs, steel-reinforced boots on his feet, and a pair of vambraces on his forearms and metal-plated gloves on his hands. The man bowed mockingly and said, well, the yellow flash of Fairy Tail himself. My name is Zalti. I'm honored to meet you. Having already noticed something strange about Zalti, Naruto simply scowled. With a smile on his face, he swiftly activated his dojutsu from the shadow of his hood and discreetly sent chakra to his eyes. Now why would you hide such beauty under that transformation, young lady? Zalti was rendered speechless by this. The woman in disguise sputtered, How? Naruto grinned. I discovered the nature of your magical energy flow. From there, learning that you were using transformation magic to hide your true form was child's play. Additionally, my senses are sharp enough for me to discern gender by scent, but your actions just now only confirmed my theory. The force of his words made Ultir Milkovich wince. That's not possible. He could smell my pharaoh and no one could detect me when I used my magic. This is embarrassing. Then her eyes widened. At least he didn't see me blushing. Wait a minute, how do you know of my beauty? She asked. The only possible explanation is that the yellow flash of Fairy Tail is more complex than first appears. I'll have to back off since I don't have any information about his abilities. She leapt away from Naruto and disappeared. Having scared the young woman away, he grinned as he was left behind. He appeared next to Erza using Shunshin no Jutsu, and when he put a hand on her right shoulder, he startled her. Ma, Benihime. Chan. Go easy on them or they'll never make it back to the guild, he said with a smile. Naruto.san, Happy and Lucy exclaimed at the same time, startled. Naruto. Why are you late? Erza asked without even glancing at him before he could respond. Sorry, I just got lost on the path of life, the blonde shinobi shrugged. His rather indifferent response caused Lucy, Happy, and even Erza to topple over. Erza stood up first, shrugging, then turned to face the captured pair. Where are Natsu and Gray? They all cried out, we don't know, because they didn't want to see Erza's scary face again. Let's go to the village that gave that S-class quest in the first place, said Naruto. That way, we might find one of them there. Erza nodded and pulled Happy and Lucy along with her. When Gray awoke, he was in an unfamiliar location, some sort of tent, with a lot of objects strewn all over it. When he finally sat up, he winced and noticed that his torso was bandaged. His ribs had been injured in some way. He crawled out of the tent, looked around, and realized he was somewhere he had never been before. He murmured, where am I? To himself. Thank goodness you're awake, cried one of the girls from the village. She wore an orange bikini top, a sea green cloth miniskirt, and a red tribal beaded necklace. She had a pretty face, short black hair, and large brown eyes. What is this place? Raised Gray's voice. The village girl muttered, this is the storage house, which is away from our village, with a dejected expression. We had to move here since the village was destroyed yesterday. Then he recalled what Leon, his former adversary, had said when he gave the order to destroy the village. Did the jerk really do it? The child continued, thanks to Natsu.san and Lucy.san, nobody was hurt and we're grateful for that. He looked back at her. Are they here too? Yes, she said with a nod. She led him over to a large tent. He yelled in surprise at what he saw in front of it. Erza? Naruto.san? Erza was sitting on a crate with her legs crossed, while Lucy and Happy were kneeling by her side, both of them crying and tied up. Naruto was leaning against a wall close by. He was remarkably silent, merely acknowledging Gray with a nod. With no courtesy, Erza said icily, Gray, weren't you supposed to get them back to the guild? I would have this type of behavior from Natsu, but you've left me speechless. In an attempt to delay, Gray sputtered, where's Natsu? The red-headed swordswoman snarled, that's what I want to know myself. He should have been in the village fighting Raite's lackeys, Lucy muttered sorrowfully. But when we went there to check for him, we didn't find anything. Happy added his 2 cents, I searched from the air, and that is how we found this place, tied up like this. Erza stood and made his way to the exit, and everyone ignored the last remark. She declared resolutely, Gray, we're going to look for Natsu. When we find him, we're returning back to the guild. What are you saying, Erza? If you've heard what's happening here, then you'd also know what's happening on the island, exclaimed Gray, shocked by her statement. She snapped coldly, so what? Gray was stunned into silence by her response. Although he was aware that she was correct, Naruto kept his personal disagreements with the redhead's opinions to himself. The redhead sneered, I came here to bring back some guild lawbreakers, she said. I have not even a sliver of interest in anything else. Gray yelled at her, didn't you see what kind of condition the people of this island are in? Yes, I did, she said with a nod. And you're just going to leave them like that? She said, their request has been posted to every guild, with a shrug. Wouldn't it be better to leave it to some other guild mages that can take on this job properly? Before he popped his knuckles, Gray flinched back, one eyebrow twitching from the intensity of his rage. All this time, clearly, I've misjudged you, he growled. She yelled, what did you say? She was growing increasingly irate at these brats' boldness in disobeying their master's orders, and now they were discussing completing a job they had initially stolen? Happy sobbed uneasily, how dare you say that to Erza? Sama. Lucy flinched at his response and his use of the highly polite suffix. The redhead used her magic to call forth her typical long sword and demanded, do you intend to break the guild rules any more than you already have? She sneered and leveled the weapon at Gray's chin, saying, you won't get away with it. Gray defiantly snatched the sword barehanded. He yelled, do what you must, as the blade sliced into his palm, causing his hand to bleed. He disengaged her sword and stood there, saying, I've chosen to follow this path and I'll see it through to the end. If you want to cut me down, do it. He turned on his heel when Erza merely scowled at him without saying anything. But just as he was ready to go, Naruto interrupted the quiet. Gray, you're in enough trouble as it is, we'll finish this job for you. Tell us everything you know about this mission. As the ice mage ceased to move, the blonde shinobi continued, Erza, now that we're here, we might as well finish this job for them. After all, we're both S-class mages. So let Lucy and Happy go. They'll be helping us. As she released Lucy and Happy, Erza snorted in response to Naruto's orders. Don't get the wrong idea. You'll still be punished when we get back to the guild. She yelled as they were about to celebrate, and Naruto pointed to some nearby crates as the two of them let out a deep sigh of agreement. He nodded at Gray to start his explanation after they had all taken a seat. Natsu, meanwhile, sat up with a groan close to the old temple. He stumbled to his feet, walked to the temple doorway, and clenched his hands, saying, I finally have a good idea and then I go and oversleep. Anyway, let's start, he bellowed, sprinting in with his fists encased in flames. Simultaneously, Radii Leone was sitting on a stone throne in the ancient temple itself, scrutinizing his lone surviving subordinate. How pitiful, he released a sigh. You're the only one left, Toby? In an attempt to hide the fact that he had already knocked himself out during their altercation with the fairy tale team, Toby twitched. Deliora's resurrection may be endangered, at this rate, Leone whispered as Zalti walked into the room. The man in the mask was far more assured. Deliora will be resurrected when we pour in the full magical power of the moon tonight. But behind Zalta's mask of magic, Ultir grimaced as he continued, but if the moon drip ceremony is interrupted, then Deliora will stay in that ice forever. To make things worse, Fairy Tail has sent the Titania and the Yellow Flash to reinforce the team that they'd initially sent. The Demon King the Yellow Flash, the newest mage in Fairy Tail, had casually shown himself to be far more dangerous than any of the 10 wizard saints had first believed. Your intelligence is fast, as always, Leone muttered. But I'm not about to be defeated. Nothing defeats the ice sword that can surpass even That is really encouraging to hear, Zalti yelled. Then again, it's been a while, but perhaps I should join in the battle myself. Yes, as you know, I have knowledge of lost magic, you see. All of a sudden, the entire temple started to tilt to one side, and the ground started to tremble. The tremors intensified, and from beneath the temple floor came muffled explosions. Leone, Zalti, and Toby were able to enter the temple through a large hole in the floors as a great stream of fire erupted from the lower chamber. What the hell is this? Exclaimed Leone. Zalti walked over to where the smoke was coming from. The masked man called back to them after a brief glance, saying, he didn't waste any time at all. Look, he's down below. Leone and Toby approached and looked down, spotting the pink-haired fairy tale mage giggling up at them. He yelled at them, I'd rather destroy it before you found me, but these ruins are a lot harder to bring down than I thought. Leone bellowed, what are you trying to do? Natsu chuckled and said, tip the building over. Then the moonlight can't land on the demon in the basement. Leone sputtered, you bastard. How dare you? You damned fairy tale mage. Toby inquired, What did he do? Leon. By destroying half of the pillars at the base of the ruins, said Zalti. He can tilt the building so that the light of moon won't hit Deliora. That's his plan, I believe. He may not look like it, but he's quite shrewd. Enough blabbing. Natsu yelled up at them, his fire magic encircling his feet, and he turned on his magic. He rose from the ground, then flashed white as plumes of flame swiftly condensed into jets. Natsu was able to launch himself at Leon and Toby like a missile, the flames from his feet roaring like an overpowered engine, because the display took them by surprise. He was shocked when the silver-haired ice mage started to break and turn into ice fragments after he flew up and gave Leon a headbutt in the stomach. Natsu stammered, searching for the real Leon. Huh? A fake? Ice eagle. The man in question yelled, waving his hand as he emerged from behind a nearby pillar. Leon mockingly said, "You can't avoid them while you're in midair," as the enchanted ice sculptures appeared and flew in his direction. Knowing that he was correct, Natsu let out a stream of flame that hit him hard and conveniently allowed him to dodge the freezing raptors. Natsu somersaulted into a handstand, attacking the ice mage with a burst of flame thrown from his feet, and Leon grunted in rage. What random magic, he complained as he ducked, avoiding the stream of fire that roared overhead. Leon dodged once more and leapt back as Natsu continued his attack with a couple of fire whips from his legs. However, Natsu managed to attack him while Leon was still in the air. "Karyu no Hoko!" he yelled while still on his hands, and he hurled a stream of fire at the defenseless Leon. However, Natsu fell to the floor below when Zalti used his magic to create a hole where he was standing. "You got luck, Reitie-sama," the enigmatic anonymous figure remarked nonchalantly. Leon demanded to know, "What did you do?" The man in the mask pondered rhetorically, "What indeed?" "Answer me, don't sidestep the question," yelled Leon angrily. "It was your magic that destroyed the floor." According to Zalti, Reitie-sama, "Nothing gets past your eyes," he said icily. "Nevertheless, please understand. I cannot afford to lose you until Deliora is resurrected." A visible icy mist hung around Leon as he flared his magic power in anger at Zalti's words and his continued evasiveness. "You're saying that I'd have been beaten if I was hit by those flames?" he growled. His power whipped and encased the whole room in a new layer of ice in an uncontrollable outburst. "Get lost. I'll finish him off myself. I'm Reitie Leon, the one and only wizard who can defeat Deliora. To even imply that I'd have trouble with a brat like him is insulting." Zalti gave a mysterious smile. My, Natsu asked naively, "Defeat Deliora?" Which made Leon turn and face the Fire Dragon Slayer mage once more. Outside the ruins, Gray had described everything, including the fact that his former mentor was the ice that surrounded the demon known as Deliora. However, he took too long explaining it. Night was drawing near and the sun was already lowering. They were about to enter the ruins when Naruto suddenly became aware of something. Uncertain of Naruto's line of reasoning, Gray nodded and asked, "So your mentor is still alive, but she's now the ice coffin that's keeping Deliora in place, right?" Smirking, the blonde shinobi said, "Come here, Gray." The ice mage obeyed, despite his surprise. "Now remember what she used to look like," Naruto whispered, his voice lulling and hypnotic. A hand gripped Gray's forehead and he nodded, closing his eyes. Less than a minute later, the hand withdrew. "That'll be all, Gray, thanks." With uncertainty, Gray muttered, "You're welcome, I guess." Erza raised an eyebrow at the screen but remained silent. As usual, she couldn't figure out Naruto's actions or intentions. They were near the ancient temple after jogging through the ruins for several hours. "I've got something important to do near here. You carry on without me," Naruto said, realizing they weren't alone. Erza turned to address him, but he had already vanished. "Let's go," she growled angrily as she turned back to Lucy, Happy, and Gray. When they arrived at the ruins a few minutes later, they discovered that a strange thing had just occurred. It was unexpected that one side of the ruins had collapsed, but they all knew that Natsu was the type of person who would do something so absurd. Erza abruptly shoved Lucy and Happy into trees nearby as crescent blades were flung at them from the bushes, just as they were about to ignore the scene. Both Erza and Gray leapt, avoiding the projectile weapons that were thrown. "Who's there?" exclaimed Erza as they touched down. There came figures in purple robes with hoods. "We found you, Fairy Tail. We won't let you mess with Rady Sama," yelled one of them. Erza hissed icily, well, so these are Lion's followers?" Lucy yelled in panic, "We're surrounded," she cried out, and so did Happy. "Leave them to me," Erza screamed, brandishing her preferred blade. "Gray, finish things with Leon." When Lucy said, "Don't worry, we're here, too, so just go," and Happy quickly agreed, Gray was unable to speak and simply nodded. He grinned as he walked toward the ruins. "You guys," he remained silent. Only a mother could appreciate the sight of the ice, covered Deliora deep within the wrecked temple. In fact, Naruto whistled in surprise as he emerged before the beast from Shunshin no Jutsu. He yelled, "Damn, you're one ugly bastard, ain't ya? At least the Biju looked cool, but you don't even have that much of an oppressive aura. This killing intent, it's nothing even close to anything that those guys could field, even when they were all sealed up, and yet you were feared. Your creator had to be terrifying than you, I'm sure of it." After initially noticing the coffin, he raised his eyebrows. "So that's the ice that San made." He summoned his new dojutsu, which he had named Chobuku Rinnegan. It was a pair of purple eyes with a crimson-red iris and 4 ripple rings, each of which had 3 tomo. With none of the weaknesses of the 3 fabled dojutsu, Byakugan, Sharingan, and Rinnegan. This mutation was the ideal dojutsu. It has its own unique jutsu as well, but he had never used them since entering this dimension, primarily because he had not yet encountered a strong enough opponent to justify their use. The flow of energies from within the ice was visible to him. Since Deliora's own life force was gradually being depleted, he could even see Er's magic and life force through the ice itself. "I believe I can restore her to her former self. I have all of her life force in front of me, and I have a thorough description of her appearance thanks to Gray." He stretched in place, cracking his knuckles. "I have both parts required for a successful reversal, but before I can start, I must wait until the ice melts, while her life force is still inside it. However, some preventative binding seals never hurt, even if the demon is already dead." Er's Ice Shell spell had the potent ability to kill the demon Deliora by draining its life force. He could see that the demon itself had been strong in its prime, but not nearly as strong as any of the Biju. Even the Ichibi no Shukaku was far more powerful than Deliora at its height, but it was still a remarkable achievement in and of itself to be able to immobilize such a figure. Indeed, magic was a terrifying thing. Many lives could have been saved by this spell on the night of Kyuubi's birth during the rampage. It was so unfortunate that this magic would not function in his world. Eternano was equivalent to Senjutsu, and the prerequisites for that skill were so strict in his home country that it was practically useless to use magic. Since he had grown to consider Kurama a friend, he couldn't bring himself to freeze him in stone. In the first place, it was the masked man Kakashi. Sensei had named Uchiha Obito who had caused his outburst that night. In an attempt to shake off that specific thought, Naruto shook his head. In order to prevent anyone from seeing him and interfering with his work, he moved behind the frozen beast and called forth a large scroll and his calligraphy set. He picked up his brush and started working on the containment seal while kneeling in front of the scroll. But he could feel Natsu fighting Leon while he was working. He let out a sigh. He needed to get this done fast. Naruto was meditating after completing his Fuinjutsu practice a few hours later. He could feel the effects of some clashing magic, and the ground was trembling. He saw Natsu and Gray on one of the temple's upper floors and activated the Chobuku Rinnegan once more to get a better look at the situation. They appeared to be engaged in combat with Leon, the opposition's apparent leader. He asked the masked mon whether he had fixed the temple yet, and he started reading their lips as Zalti entered and informed Leon that the ritual would soon start. When Natsu asked the same question, the masked man laughed and quickly turned away from the boy with the pink hair. As Gray moved to fight Leon, the Fire Dragon Slayer lost his temper and charged the masked man, attempting to punch him in the face. To Naruto's astonishment, they both employed ice make magic. Erza, Lucy, and Happy were all engaged in combat with Lion's minions outside the temple when Naruto noticed them. He was unable to participate since he needed to wait for the ice to transform into water that was saturated with energy through the moon drip ritual. Fortunately, his wait was short. He saw a familiar figure approaching as a strange liquid poured down from the cavern ceiling in the basement. He hid in the shadows and saw it was Zalti, the changed woman. Now that he thought about it, he could even sense that Zalti and had a similar energy. They probably had a family relationship. His suspicions were only validated when Zalti revealed that, in contrast to the picture of her he had received from Gray, the woman underneath actually resembled to some extent. He began infusing his chakra into the Fuinjutsu containment seal, wondering briefly why and how, but not really caring. As the chakra began to absorb the water that melted from the ice, the seal array glowed a pale blue. A huge explosion behind her prompted Zalti to put on her disguise once more as she took a step back and looked warily at the intricate arrangement of a magical circle that she had never seen before. Additionally, it was just in time because Natsu arrived a few moments later and was eager for a fight. Zalti teased, "Salamander.kun, how did you find me?" Natsu grinned. "I've got a good nose, and you smell like women's perfume, for some reason." They began to fight, much to Naruto's amusement. Naruto found it intriguing that Zalti's magic appeared to regulate the temporal flows of entities other than humans. He recognized the irony of a practical skill with such a debilitating flaw. When he looked up after hearing an explosion on the temple's upper floors, he saw that Gray had defeated Leon by shooting him with ice cannon, which just looked awesome. The cliched pun made Naruto laugh, but he was startled out of his reverie by a loud screeching roar. He flinched, tempted to use his hands to block out the awful sound. When he realized that Deliora was the source of the sound, his eyes widened. Zalti and Natsu continued to fight in the meantime. Zalti used a crystal ball to beat the living daylights out of Natsu, multiplying the number of balls and causing the orbs to rain down on him. However, the pink-haired fire dragon slayer took advantage of it, eliminating them all in a single blow and creating a smoke cloud that concealed him until he was able to deliver a forceful blow to Zalti's jaw, sending him flying. In an attempt to stop the monster, Gray arrived as soon as he could. Even Leon, half dead, came to battle the creature, but Gray sliced him in the back of the neck, knocking him out. However, Naruto's containment seal had completed gathering all of the melted ice and water just as he was ready to prime Iced Shell himself. Before putting the Fuinjutsu scroll in his pouch, Naruto picked it up and rolled it up. He appeared in front of Gray using Shunshin no Jutsu, and he was able to startle him long enough to prevent him from casting the spell. "I'll stop Deliora," the blonde shinobi said solemnly. Gray was about to argue, but he quickly stopped when he saw Naruto's eyes. He raised his left hand and turned back to the beast, nodding. "Chakra no Kusari Jutsu," was yelled, causing a number of golden, glowing spiked chains with kunai heads on top to shoot out of Naruto's palm and ensnare Deliora entirely. The blonde shinobi pulled on the beast's chains and crushed it into dust before the beast could even move a muscle. Natsu, Leon, and Gray stood erect and gaping. The strength of a man who could so easily defeat Deliora frightened them all. Naturally, that was right before Natsu began yelling about how awesome Naruto's most recent stunt was. However, Zalti was also taken aback. With a single blow, the yellow flash of Fairy Tail vanquished one of Zeref's demon creations. There was no doubt that this had to reach him. Naruto let out a sigh. He casually reprimanded the Fire Dragon Slayer, saying, "That's not as impressive as I made it look, Natsu. That demon was on its last legs. Erza's magic had already defeated it to begin with. Plus, I have something else to do now." He glanced at Gray and took out a scroll. "I have something that might bring you to tears, Gray," he said sardonically as he unfolded the scroll and presented it to him. Naruto closed his eyes and used a single hand sign to make a cage bunshin. Despite their shock, the onlookers did nothing to avoid upsetting him. Just as the shinobi opened his eyes, the bunshin touched the middle of the scroll and yelled, "Kai!" The seal then started to glow brightly. Gray noticed that Naruto's blue eyes had been replaced by purple ripples and a pair of crimson irises. Then he saw that those eyes were the same as the Hanya mask that had materialized following Natsu's initial attempt to strike him. Recalling the icy, deadly, dark aura that had seemed to hover around that horrifying spectral face, he shivered instinctively. Natsu twitched as he experienced the same dreaded cold that he had experienced the one time he had enraged Naruto. He turned to face the blonde shinobi and saw that his eyes now matched those in that dreaded demon mask. Following a series of hand seals, Naruto shouted, "Onmyoten! Banbutsu Sozo!" as he clapped his hands together. Everyone was blinded by a burst of white light, but Naruto could see Erza's collected life force starting to form and recreate her body. The water, saturated with her life force and magic power, was quickly absorbed by her body and condensed into real flesh and blood. Gray, Natsu, and Leon were all taken aback by what they discovered when the dazzling light eventually went out. A fully fleshed and blood woman, was once again alive and lying unconscious on Naruto's scroll. Naturally, the Cage Bunshin immediately made up for her total nudity by covering her body with an enormous cloak. However, before they could continue, Naruto collapsed to the ground, unconscious, his nose and mouth dripping blood. None of them saw Zalti get to his feet and cast a transformation spell, revealing the young woman Naruto had previously met and learned about. Ultir Milkovich, trying to make sense of what she had just witnessed, gazed at the five of them for a long few minutes before cloaking herself in her transformation magic once more and vanishing into spirit form. Was her mother still alive? Saturday, August 21st, Galuna Island, X-784 Erza and Naruto had taken control of the pirate ship, and Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Happy were all departing the island after the mission was successfully completed. After completing an S-class quest and demonstrating to themselves that they had some mettle, the four of them were grinning widely. However, Erza became concerned when she saw that Naruto had remained silent. She was still trying to figure out how he had brought back Gray's mentor for academic purposes, so she asked, "What's wrong, Naruto? You haven't said a word ever since you woke up after reviving San. Are you angry at Natsu, Lucy, Gray, and Happy?" Naruto turned to face each one of them. When he finally said, "I'm not angry, more like disappointed. I expected better from the four of you. You shouldn't have taken a mission like that. Gray, you should have brought them back instead of joining them." As expected, Natsu began to yell as the other three cast shameful glances down. Naruto turned away from them and gazed out to sea. His face showed a strange mix of sadness, anger, and nostalgic longing when he turned back to them. At last, he concluded, "You know, my first teacher used to say a phrase that I took to heart and still follow to this day. Those that break rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum." Erza yelled at him, "Naruto, calling them scum is uncalled for and very harsh." The blonde shinobi sighed and raised his hands in surrender, saying, "Hey, relax, Benihime-chan, I haven't made my point yet. The reason that Master even placed those rules is to ensure the safety of everybody in the guild, and they just went and disregarded his judgment." He returned to the shore and said, "You guys didn't do that for your comrades. Your own selfish desires wanted the prestige of pulling off an S-rank mission successfully, and you went and almost got yourselves killed for your trouble." Lucy, Gray, and Natsu looked at one another uneasily. Natsu's hot-headedness had led him to believe that he could replicate the shinobi's feat because they had been so engrossed in Naruto's monstrous power and casual boredom with everyday jobs. He had successfully persuaded Happy and Lucy to engage in his particular brand of stupidity, and he had tricked Gray into it after his rival had discovered the location of the mission. When the three of them turned to face Naruto, they saw that he was absently twirling a kunai around his finger. Naruto added, "What would you have done if you couldn't handle the realities of the mission?" After allowing them to consider his words for a sufficient amount of time. "What if there had been more trouble than you could handle? Then what you do? You could have sacrificed each other's lives, but for what? To know what it's like to do an S-rank mission. Making mistakes. I don't know how disappointed I should be in the four of you when I've done some things just as stupid." Naruto then departed to give them time to consider what he had said. Happy, Lucy, Gray, and Natsu all sat there silently, attempting to decipher what he had said. There was another reason Erza was deep in thought. This is the first time that he's ever spoken about his past. He's almost as much of a host of sorrows as me, but he can still smile warmly to everyone. What's happened to him to make him the man that he is today? Sunday, August 22nd, X-784 Ultir Milkovich stammered through her thought projection magic. "I'm sorry, Seagrain Sama, but I didn't think that woman's magic would be that powerful." To her. "Also, I was taken completely off guard when I learned that the yellow flash somehow had the ability to resurrect the dead. He restores that woman to life, using the ice that she used to seal the demon Delior away, and even destroys it as though it was little more than an annoyance." As his mind raced to process Ultir's data, Jelal Sigran Fernandez, deep within the walls of Earthland's Magic Council headquarters in Era, raised an eyebrow. Naturally, he had heard the rumors and read all of the incident reports. However, hearing his best subordinate essentially validate the rumors only had some extremely disagreeable ramifications. "Go on," he said coolly, his eyes narrowing slightly to show that he was once again interested in Yellow Flash from Fairy Tail. He had this wonderfully sinister aura about him, and those eyes, they made me shiver, Ultir mumbled, panting, recalling Naruto's glaring expression. The cold glare. I felt as though I was little more than an ant under the weight of his eyes. I'm beginning to think that the rumors about him being more powerful than Zarif are true. Intrigued, Jell-El whispered, "Do you, now?" Ultir's assurance had to be taken very seriously because he didn't know that she was a woman who was prone to fantasies. He must be very powerful indeed. We already know that his magic is unique enough that we've never seen them before. We must be careful to not draw his attention to us, or he might become a problem. One thing, though, continued to bother him. It seemed that his supposed power to bring the dead back to life had been verified. Ultir frowned as he continued, but the fact that he can raise the dead is a powerful skill. She was still experiencing intense conflict and didn't like being reminded that she had witnessed her mother's return. He may yet prove useful in our quest to resurrect Zarif the Black Mage. Moreover, please don't talk about your mother like that, Ultir. I respect your mother. If she hadn't died fighting Deliora, she probably would have been one of the 10 wizard saints by now. Ultir merely scoffed. You think too highly of her. My mother is a pitiful and miserable woman who was so obsessed with magic that my father abandoned her. Now that she's back, she'll go back to whatever rat hole that she sets up for herself. The more important things you lose, the more power you can obtain, Jell-El thought, slightly grinning. Ultir yelled, I was of little consequence to my mother, but her company conspirator could clearly hear the hint of melancholy and bitterness in her voice. His words, I do wonder about that, went on. As you know, she raised those 2 students out of regret and her lingering affection for you. You might even go in. Enough, she interrupted him with a snap. Let's deal with the next stage. He saw the left side of her jaw beginning to swell as he gazed at her stunning face. What's wrong with your face? He asked her in a courteous manner. She looks into a mirror and screams. What the hell is this? He chuckles. It swells up now. Speaking of which, what was your impression of Natsu during your fight? She put her hand on the swollen cheek and winced. I didn't even use half of my power, but he had an impressive strength of will. He'll only grow stronger and stronger, but we have to be wary of the Yellow Flash, too. You know, he goes by another name. Oh, the Demon King of Fairy Tail, charming. We'll just have to see about that. Sunday, August 22nd, X784 Naruto had just joined Team Natsu outside the train station in Magnolia Town when he burst out sneezing. Worried, Erza said, Are you all right, Naruto-kun? Are you catching a cold? Fairy Tail's Yellow Flash merely chuckled. Oh no, I don't get sick at all. This was probably someone talking about me behind my back. Although she raised an eyebrow, she dismissed the remark as a joke. After they arrived at the city limits, Naruto declared his intention to return home before disappearing in a burst of yellow light. Lucy, Happy, and Natsu continued to reflect on Naruto's talk. Erza was attempting to understand Naruto and all of his enigmatic facets. Gray was recalling what had happened yesterday. Rewind. Yesterday, Gray was shocked by what he saw and began to question whether his eyes were deceiving him. Thanks to Naruto, his teacher was back. However, Naruto collapsed to the ground before he could even speak to him. With a sigh of relief, Gray ran up to his comrade and checked his pulse. Naruto was still alive, albeit unconscious. He turned back to and saw that she had just awoken. Gave a feeble smile as their eyes locked. She rasped, long time, no see, Gray, and that was sufficient. Gray sobbed as he embraced her. She gave him a comforting back rub. In an attempt to reassure him, she rasped, It's okay, Gray. When Leon learned that his mentor, the person he most admired, had come back from the dead, he was stunned to silence. Then he started crying too, tears of sadness, embarrassment, and shame in addition to tears of joy. I could have lost her forever, he realized after the fact that she was still alive despite the ice. She grinned as she turned to Leon. She grunted and gave him a light arm punch. Leon, my idiot disciple, I forgive you, too, she exclaimed. If not for you, I'd still be a block of ice. When he was unable to contain his tears any longer, he broke down in tears and begged her to forgive him despite everything he had done. Felt tears stinging her eyes as her maternal senses went into overdrive, and she only gave the boys hugs while they were crying. Naruto was hit in the face by the morning sunlight that crept through the window shutters. With a grimace, he buried his face in his pillow and covered his closed eyes with his hand. For a split second, he remained in that position before sitting up in bed and cursing a blue streak while nursing a rather bothersome migraine. I'm definitely soft now. I need to work on that when we get back. Hearing the soothing crack of stiffened joints and the faint ache of loosening muscles, he stretched his body and let out a sigh. Then, seeing a wild mane of fiery red hair on the pillow beside him, he grinned. He gave a wry smile. I now understand my father's feelings upon meeting my mother. I believe that we are destined to be attracted to women with exotic hair. Damn it all, Dad, you are to blame. Unbelievably, Happy came into the room at that precise moment and screamed for help to get him away from Natsu. Not far behind was the Fire Dragon Slayer. Apparently, Happy had said something that infuriated the hothead with the pink hair. Naturally, to Naruto's dismay, all the commotion roused Erza. He couldn't help but notice how adorable she looked as she yawned and wiped the sleep from her eyes. His eyes were on her, and she turned away, flushed. Gray entered first, then Lucy, and then who spoke first. She said, "Good morning, Naruto-san," with an unusual amount of deference to a stranger. The blonde ninja smiled back at her, and everyone turned to face him, having only just realized he was there. "Good morning to you all," he said with a smile while knuckling absently. Everyone, with the exception of Erza and fell to the ground in a fit of rage at his casual demeanor. "Naruto! Fight me!" Natsu sprang to his feet and charged at the ninja who was still in bed. "No," Naruto said calmly, sidestepping the blow with ease before slapping Natsu across the forehead, which somehow sent him flying through the open bedroom door, colliding with the wall of the hallway behind him, and instantly knocking him out. Before Gray grabbed the bull by the horns, everyone there twitched at his casually violent response to Natsu's challenge. "Naruto-san, if I'm not being rude in asking, how did you manage to revive sensei?" As Naruto's bangs obscured his eyes, that question caught everyone's attention. He let out a long sigh, knowing that he would eventually have to discuss his abilities. At last, he said, "I'll only tell you guys if you promise to not tell anyone else about them." They all made promises, and he went on. "I revived by combining my special ability with these eyes." He gestured to his eyes and shocked everyone by using Histojutsu once more. 3 concentric circles, each dotted with 3 tomo, appeared to ripple outward from a blood-red pupil, and his ocean. Blue irises had darkened to a royal purple. Having already seen them, Gray didn't react. Erza and were more shocked than anything else, while Lucy and Happy were nearly terrified. Natsu's amazed yelling relieved the tension. "That's so cool, Naruto-san. How did you do that?" When Naruto saw that they were all more interested than afraid, he grinned. When they returned, he ought to do something kind for Natsu. "What you see in my eyes now is the Chobuku Rinnegan, a unique and hereditary mutation that grants me powerful abilities. One of these abilities allows me to see the flow of energy. That helped me determine if san was alive or not. If she was dead, I wouldn't have brought her back. In any case, since she was still alive, I used a jutsu that allows me to alter reality in order to reshape the life energy in the iced shell spell into anything I could imagine. But I had to read Gray's memory in order to see body. Using her life force to bring her back was easy, in comparison to actually shaping the melted ice into a flesh and blood body. I needed Gray's memories of as a template for successfully reshaping her body into what he remembered." He turned to and suddenly realized something. "By the way, do you have a sister or something?" The non-sequitur question caused to raise an eyebrow. "No, I was an only child and I have no family anymore. I was married once, you see. I even had a daughter. But she died and my husband left me soon afterwards." "Why?" The blonde ninja explained. "I asked because I met a young woman that bore an aura signature that's very similar to yours. Come to think of it, she even looked like you somewhat. A very attractive young woman with pale skin, long hair, and makeup. She also had some kind of time control magic. I think she called it time arc." Also, she used transformation magic to disguise herself as a masked man named Zalti. Erza's only answer was, "Oh." Then Natsu became alert, seeing something. "Hey, I fought the time. Controlling masked man. But he smelled funny, he wore women's perfume." Naruto pressed her. "I understand that remembering this hurts you. But are you sure that your daughter's dead? She could very well be that young lady I met. 10 years have passed ever since you sealed Deliora away." "But that's," stammered, her savior's words clashing with painful memories. She trailed off, the doctor said, when she came to a realization that made her cry. "Oh, no, no, what did I do?" she cried, hysterically tumbling to her knees. In an attempt to console her, Gray was at her side right away. He said, "What's wrong, sensei?" She sobbed for a long time. The others were perplexed, but Naruto already suspected that had experienced a terrible event in the past. Started talking after she had calmed down a little. "I had a child once, a daughter. She got sick when she was small. I took her to a good doctor in the hopes that he could make her well again." Gray's fists were clenched, and Lucis' eyes were already watering. Yelled angrily, "But that damned doctor tricked me. He said that she died and her body was so badly mutilated that I wouldn't want to see her." Natsu actually growled, but Naruto just closed his eyes and lamented the loss of innocence in silence. Sniffled and mumbled, "I was devastated when he informed me that she had passed away. I didn't want to see if she really had been mutilated by the illness effects on her in death. I didn't want my best memories of her to be tainted by such a ghastly image. Like an idiot, I believed him. I left without seeing her body." Erza whispered, "So the young woman really is your daughter. What's her name, San?" Ultir Milkovich. Flashback end. Gray was abruptly brought back to reality when Erza started talking. "Now, let's get back to the guild and let the master decide your punishment." "Shit," complained Gray. "I almost forgot, regarding this case, I kept thinking I could overlook your actions." After a collective sigh of relief, Erza continued, "But the master renders the verdict. I do not intend to defend you, either. So be prepared for your punishment." Their heads hung low as they all moaned in desperation. Then, recalling something crucial, Gray winced. He cursed, "Oh, shit. The geezer will do that to us." Happy cried out in fear, "Oh, no, you don't mean that, Gray." Lucy said, "Natsu, what is that they're talking about?" as Natsu was grinning blindly. She was even more frightened when his face abruptly changed from a joyful smile to one of obvious terror in front of her. Erza grinned a little. "Oh, I think Master will definitely do that to you guys as punishment. I feel sorry for you, Lucy. Even you will get that as well." In terror, Lucy was clutching a small stuffed animal. She yelled, "I don't understand. What is that you guys are talking about?" Erza saw that the residents of Magnolia Town were whispering among themselves. Natsu and Gray had their heads bowed in resignation, and Lucy had persisted in questioning them about that, without success. She thought hypothetically. Are they scared of us or something? Then, witnessing a sight she had hoped would never occur, she was only able to hold back a gasp as she noticed something odd and incredibly shocking. When he heard Lucy gasp aloud and Natsu growl, Gray jolted out of his funk. After looking around to see what his countrymen were staring at, he croaked in shock. They ran up to the Fairy Tale Guildhall, the four of them bursting into a run as one. Upon closer inspection, though, they discovered that the Guildhall had been completely destroyed. The guild was like a giant pincushion, with enormous iron shafts thrown throughout its walls. Our guild is ruined," snarled Natsu, trembling with anger. "What in the world happened here?" demanded an equally enraged Erza. "Phantom Lord," said Mirajane, who had just returned from an errand, behind them. Gray calmed down and asked, "What did you just say?" "Phantom Lord," snarled Natsu, clearly enraged. The demon of Fairy Tale frowned and said, "I hate to say it, but they got us," with a hint of rage in her voice. In the meantime, Naruto was only wearing a pair of shinobi pants and was shirtless in his home. He was worn out, which was unusual for him. However, this was due to the fact that he had used the Chobuku Rinnegan without fully unlocking his power, not the mission. Therefore, employing a jutsu of the Onmyoten type, such as Banbutsu Sozo, depleted the majority of his normal chakra reserves and rendered him unconscious. Naruto had to release his sealed power in order to even use the ninjutsu safely because it was categorized as an absurdly powerful S-class jutsu rather than just being impossible. He sighed as he recalled why he had initially locked away the great majority of his power, but that warning had its own set of issues. Because of the leaking evidence of his immense power, he was unable to move around without killing civilians. For the past 4 years, he had been training himself to manage his power, and it had paid off. He could now move about without causing harm to others. He had not forgotten the irony of this necessity, and he had sealed himself with a suppression seal just to be sure. He was now going to release those seals for the first time in 4 years. He started to release all of the chakra that he had bottled up just 3 years prior while seated in the lotus meditation pose. As he strained to keep up the slow trickle required to effectively release these extraordinary reserves, he frowned. He couldn't release all of that chakra at once because he would blow up from the stress of the past 3 years, and the room would look like a horror film with what was left of him. He was forced to sit there and gradually release the seals until he eventually opened roughly a tenth of the entire array. He experienced a surge of revitalizing chakra that restored his vitality and healed his wounds. With a joyful sigh, he got to his feet and stretched while throwing a few punches into the air. Uzumaki Naruto, will never become as soft as Sarutobi. Gigi, he exclaimed with a wide smile. Unaware that the guild had been attacked, he spent a few hours training in his backyard, gradually releasing his seal and boosting his strength. He came to a swift stop, unwilling to let the floods continue. Rather, he returned to meditation, expanding his consciousness and starting to regulate his breathing. This made it possible for his Senin mode to be activated by the world's natural energy. To his astonishment, however, he discovered that many hostile foreign signatures were present in the guild hall itself, and that his friends' signatures were underground. He got up to dress, and his eyes popped open. He moaned, "Damn it all, now what happened? I hope nothing bad," and disappeared while traveling to the guild hall in Shunshin no Jutsu. When Naruto emerged from a smoky explosion outside the guild hall a few minutes later, he was astounded to see the extent of the damage. He saw that, much like Erza's iced shell spell, magical energy, known to the locals as Eternino, flushed through each of the metal columns. The guild members were in the basement, not the guild hall. His nostrils perked up as he entered, and he became aware that the air was devoid of the smells of death and blood, which typically accompanied such a devastating assault. The guild hall, however, had been severely damaged. However, he sighed with relief because he didn't want any of his new friends to suffer harm or pass away. Then from downstairs he heard a voice he knew shouting. He heard Natsu yelling, "They attacked us first," as he descended into the basement. With an irritated tone, Mirajane interrupted, "Natsu, that's not the problem. We all know that the Magic Council prohibited conflict between guilds." Erza continued, "If that's how Master feels, then there is nothing we can do about it. The Master's wisdom is truly great. He knows of the horrors of war," Naruto said, feeling impish, as he slipped into the group until he was directly behind Erza. Everyone in the temporary guild hall turned basement was taken aback by his quiet, unassuming demeanor. As soon as Naruto waved joyfully at them, they all turned to face him with wide eyes. Everyone there, with the exception of Erza and Mirajane, fell to the ground in a fit of surprise at his easygoing manner. Mirajane said, "Welcome back, Naruto-kun," with a smile. "But what did you mean?" The blonde smiled nonchalantly, "Oh, that." He rolled his eyes as he explained, "What I meant was that this attack was just a means to provoke us into starting a fight. Nobody's been hurt too badly or killed, have they? Who attacked us, anyway, Mira-chan?" he said, his guildmates looking doubtful. Despite her frown, Mirajane said, "The Phantom Lord Guild." Naruto scratched his chin thoughtfully and said out loud, "Oh, I remember something about how they used to be the top magic guild in Fury, right?" Natsu shouted, "Naruto, we have to go kick their ass." "No," the blonde shinobi said icily, his voice so icy that it made Natsu tense and shocked the guild with how quickly his mood changed. He went on, and Mirajane nodded. "They might be angry that our guild took their spot at the top. Now, they're probably seeking a way to get revenge or to destroy us. If we don't do anything to fight back, they'll start attacking members of our guild and try to start a war." Erza then added her 2 cents, and he rolled his neck uneasily. "But that begs the question. Why would they risk being labeled a dark guild, just to take us down? There has to be something else at work here." they wouldn't risk so much on such a trivial matter like revenge. In any case, Naruto sighed, since Master said that there's no need to worry about them, forget them. But, in the interest of safety, I suggest that everyone stay together in groups. Everyone in the makeshift guild hall listened to what Naruto had to say. They knew he was a powerful and experienced mage because he became an S-class mage in just 2 weeks and set a guild record for the most missions completed in a week. As his new family followed his advice and started chatting among themselves in small groups, the blonde grinned a little. He turned to Mira-Jane and Erza and said, "Mira-chan, you and your brother are welcome to stay in my house, and Benihime-chan can bring her team along as well. My house is big enough for all of you, so don't worry. I won't take no for an answer from either of you, understand?" Erza and Mira-Jane both reddened and shook their heads in denial, claiming that they weren't interfering with his civility. On the inside, though, they were all concerned about what their developing feelings for the strong young man would cause them to do if they were to spend so much time near him. As a small portion of his dark aura came out and he brought forth that dreaded horned Hanya mask once more, he grinned. The entire guild was frozen by the weight of his dark aura. They had seen and felt its effects after Natsu had attempted to attack him, so they understood what this weight meant. Happy whispered, "Do not anger Naruto-sama at all," and Lucy winced in terror. "I," shouted Natsu. Natsu's acting like Happy again, and Happy even used the respectful term Sama, too. Lucy was crying. "Only a man can be as scary as Naruto-san," Elfman whispered, making Gray shudder. Erza was taken aback by the sinister sensation. She had never encountered such a frightening little trick in person, and she blushed a little as the chilling sensation seemed to pierce her body and freeze her bones in place. She blinked as his presence suddenly took on a crushing weight that threatened to annihilate her body and soul. Her blood ran frantically, as if the air had suddenly become extremely cold. Mira-Jane, for her part, was flushed red as well, but for a different cause. Her body started to feel warm, and her heart started to beat quickly. She was urged to mate with this dark and strong demon and gain his significant power for herself by her demonic side, which she had not even recognized since that awful day. Images that suggested amazing ecstasy flooded her mind as her imagination started to run wild. Together, the two flushed young women exclaimed, "Yes, Naruto-sama. We'll come with you and stay at your home," with a shiver of delight. As the weird, oppressive weight lifted and everyone's breathing returned to normal, Naruto grinned and nodded. Because Naruto could frighten Erza Scarlet into obedience, Lucy was a little afraid of him. But she began to wonder about him after that. Naruto was an enigmatic figure with absurdly powerful abilities. She could see why he would frighten Natsu, but how could Erza have been at risk from his influence? She was still no closer to truly understanding him, even after the scant information he had given them about the Chobuku Rinnegan. What was the reason behind her feeling that she knew him from somewhere? He smiled and said, "So, let's be on our way," before halting and turning back to face them with a sheepish expression. "Oh, yeah. I forgot that you guys don't know where I live. Well, you're in for a real treat, then." Whispering among themselves, the other members of the guild followed him as he left. After about 15 minutes of traveling west from the demolished guild hall, Naruto came to a huge gate that was framed by the front legs of a huge statue of a 10-tailed fox with its mouth wide open in a roar. The size of the statue and gate astounded everyone. The first to speak was a stunned Natsu. He exclaimed, "That is so cool, Naruto. Is this your home?" Only Erza, Mira-Jane, and Lucy truly noticed Naruto's melancholy smile. "This might be my house, Natsu, but my home." He interrupted himself as he saw Happy the flying cat flying in the direction of the fox statue, spreading his wings. Unexpectedly, he yelled, "Happy, don't get too close to that statue," out loud. The winged cat, perched on the statue's muzzle, asked incoherently, "Why?" The eyes of the fox statues then glowed blood-red, as though to respond to his query. As it came to life, the creature roared and shook itself loose. Happy cried out in terror as the roar threw him away, and he clung to Natsu's head in terror. A ball of crimson energy appeared from the statue's wide open mouth as if it were yawning. Such a strong blast would undoubtedly destroy them at such a close range. They couldn't escape that thing with their lives by running. But before it could catch fire, Naruto ignited his chakra, causing everyone to shudder under the force of his might. The statue only needed a moment of what seemed like soul-crushing force to recognize its master, halt its attack, and revert to its starting position. Lucy, still shivering, yelled, "What the hell just tried to kill us?" to no one in particular. Naruto shrugged and said, "An automated defense mechanism that I designed for unwanted visitors, which caused everyone to turn and look at him. I used that giant fox golem to protect my home from outsiders, invaders, and the like. Obviously, they'll roar to warn off intruders at first, but they will automatically attack anything that they don't recognize." As they kept staring at him, he said, "My sentry will only stop when I'm nearby or if their target has been destroyed. But don't worry about that. I'm going to key each and every last one of you guys into my security systems so that it won't attack you." Everyone in the group sighed. The gate opened on its own as they approached it, and they were astounded by what they saw. In addition to having a large and lovely garden with a large reflecting pool in the front yard situated on the left side of the paved path leading up to the large house's front door, Naruto's house had an exotic design with sloping roofs that curved upwards at a gentle angle on each of its levels. In a highly exaggerated display of flamboyance, Naruto stood in front of them with his arms outstretched as though to absorb the amazing sight before he said, "Welcome to my humble home." The entire group pondered almost simultaneously what kind of home Naruto would view as extravagant if the exotically designed mansion in front of him was merely a house. A light-skinned woman with blonde hair and light-green eyes materialized just as he was ready to welcome them in, bowing to Naruto like a prince. He let out a moan. "Maya-chan, how many times do I have to tell you not to bow to me like that?" "I'm very sorry, Naruto-sama, but I'll never learn," added the blonde woman with a smile. "If you hadn't come along when you had, I and my whole family would have died at the hands of those werewolves." An older man with dark hair and light blue eyes also appeared and bowed at the waist as Naruto complained about promises and saving people. "You know that she's right, Naruto-sama," the man with the slight tan said sourly. "As we've already told you, our family tradition states that we must serve anyone who saves our lives." Naruto moaned, "Not you too, Marco-san. I thought I told you that calling me master wasn't going to fly. I'm not your master. I save anyone who's in trouble." And the first person to say, Naruto, was Erza. "If you don't mind me asking, who exactly are these people?" He began, Benihime-chan, as if he had just discovered that he had brought them along. "This gentleman here is Marco Polo-san and his wife Maya Polo-san. They have 4 beautiful children, each of whom you'll meet once you're actually inside my house." Mira-Jane was interested now. "How exactly did you meet them, Naruto-kun?" The blonde shinobi shrugged and said, "There's not much of a story there, Mira-chan. I was passing through Fiore's northwest region a while back when I came across their family surrounded by a pack of werewolves that had attacked and destroyed their village. I saved them, but couldn't get to anyone else from that village in time." He grumbled as unpleasant recollections came to mind. "So I had the unique pleasure of exterminating that entire werewolf pack." Marco continued, "I'm grateful to Naruto-sama for saving my children. I have sworn myself to his service," as they considered Naruto's clear statement. Maya said, "Naruto-sama, dinner will be served in a few minutes. Why don't we take your guests to their rooms and let them refresh themselves?" While Naruto complained about something. He gave a weary sigh and nodded. "Good idea, Maya-chan. You might as well let your kids show them to their quarters. I'll be up in the library." When Lucy learned that Naruto had a library, she became ecstatic and exclaimed, "Naruto-san, can I go to the library with you?" He said, "Sure you can. After you eat," with a smile. "I need to do something first." As Marco and Maya led his guests into Naruto's home, he disappeared in an abrupt whirlwind. Their 4 children surrounded the 2 of them and their charges before they could move their master's guests to guest rooms in different wings of Naruto's spacious house. The oldest were twins, a girl and a boy, both 15 years old. Zigor, a boy with dirty, blonde hair and green eyes, asked Elfman a lot of questions about what it meant to be a man. Rosalia, a girl with dark hair and steel blue eyes, blushed slightly and appeared a little bashful around Natsu and Gray. Julio, who was 10 years old, was the 3rd child. Strangely, he might have looked exactly like his father Marco, save for the fact that his right eye was light blue and his left eye was light Green. Given that he had tied a simple knot into Happy's tail and the flying cat had not yet noticed, he was vivacious and somewhat of a prankster. Elizabeth, who was 6 years old, came last but certainly not least. Mira Jane gave the girl, whom everyone called Eliza Chan, a tight hug and called her adorable because of her light blonde hair, sky blue eyes, and tiny freckles on her tiny face. Paradoxically, the family's youngest children suddenly started squabbling over Happy. When their mother stepped in, she prevented poor Happy from being torn apart. Happy cowered behind Natsu's head and whimpered something about demonic children while the rest of the gang laughed. Lucy, Mira Jane, and Erza are led by the 3 female Polo family members to their quarters in the east wing of Naruto's opulent residence. Maya laughed and wondered out loud if anyone would be interested in a late-night visit when Mira Jane asked her where Naruto slept. All 3 of them blushed in embarrassment at her thinly veiled insinuation. To make matters worse, Maya said, "You can't miss it. Just walk up the central staircase until you see an orange door. That door leads to his personal apartment. It's right next to the white door that leads up to the attic." Maya laughed, and the girls huffed in shame. "I'll tell you something else about Naruto. Sama," she said, drawing their interest. "He's a very secretive man. Not that he wants to, but he's had a lot of bad things happen to him. He must have lost someone important to him. He might seem strong, but he's actually heartbroken inside. I'm hoping that you girls might be the help that he needs to put his heart back together again." Concerned about Maya's word choice, Erza questioned, "Don't you mean one of us would help him?" Maya smiled and said, "No, I actually meant all of you." She laughed when she said, "I think that all of you might have a connection to him somehow." Erza, Lucy, and Mira Jane flushed at her implication. Maya paused at a simple door, flipped on its lights, and opened it. The room left her 3 temporary charges feeling impressed. It had 3 full-sized beds and was rather spacious. They even had individual nightstands for each bed, with a little lamp on top. The room also featured a large bathroom with a rather large tub and a couple of shower nozzles hanging over it. The girls had bright eyes. "Wow," exclaimed Lucy. "This is almost like a 5-star hotel room." "Oh, yes," Mira Jane said absently, preferring to examine the room's muted ornamental design. "Even better, we don't have to be with the boys. We can sleep here without Natsu's snoring or Elfman's shouting," Erza said. She preferred to awe at the expansive view of Naruto's backyard and the majestic mountains in the distance. Maya thought, "Naruto. Sama does have a private hot spring," in a leading voice. "Would you girls like a dip?" Erza, Mira Jane, and a bright-eyed Lucy all yelled, "We'd love to," as they put their bags on the ground and followed the blonde woman out. Gray, Elfman, and Natsu were being shown to a guest room in the west wing by Marco and his 2 boys. However, the 3 of them were still too angry about Phantom Lord's bold attack to engage in conversation. Their guide turned to them and stopped in front of a random door. Calmly, "Here you go, boys," he said. "This will be your room. Just remember, don't break anything, or Naruto Sama will have your heads." They all 3 shivered and gave weak nods. None of the memories were likely to provoke Naruto's wrath in the near future. Marco turned on the lights and opened the door to their room, seemingly satisfied. The 3 beds, each with a small lamp and nightstand, were highlighted by the room's muted decor. None of them had imagined how luxurious the large bathroom that was connected to the room itself could be. Natsu led, as was to be expected. "I call this bed, it belongs to me and Happy now," he yelled as he leapt and dove onto the bed beneath the window. "I," Happy cheerfully added. Gray ran to the closest bed and grabbed a pillow, which he threw at Natsu, striking him in the face. "Damn it. I wanted that bed, you hothead," he yelled. The pink-haired fire dragon slayer roared back, "You icy exhibitionist prick." Gray was knocked flat on the ground after being struck in the face by the thrown pillow. As Elfman attempted to step in, Natsu roared with laughter in triumph. He yelled, "Are you 2 men or not? You should fight like men." For his trouble, he received a double blow to the face, a pillow from both Gray and Natsu. With a growl, he grabbed the 2 pillows and roared into the battle. Marco shook his head impatiently as he stood by the sidelines. The group gathered for dinner in the dining room 2 hours later. Maya approached Naruto with a water pitcher while they were eating. "Naruto Sama, Please lock your library so Julio.kun and Eliza Chan cannot get in and ruin your notes. You do remember what happened last time, yes? Lucy brightened. Oh, that reminds me. With her hands clasped together like she was praying, she was practically pleading with him. Naruto.kun, could you please let me in your library? Pretty please? Naruto let out a sigh. He said, fine, as Lucy gave a joyful squeal. He was never able to refuse a pretty face. Erza and Mirajane both asked him at the same time, can I see your library as well? He nodded indulgently and laughed. After dinner a short while later, Naruto led the girls upstairs to his library. When Lucy saw that she could see entire bookcases for miles around, she let out a gasp. Erza saw an orange covered book with the title Icha Icha Paradise. She read only a few pages of it, somewhere in the second half, before she began to blush horribly. Naruto remarked nonchalantly, you know, you could borrow that, behind her. Erza began, twitching from the embarrassment of her situation. He further humiliated her by saying, I didn't know you were into racy smut novels, Arrow. Benihime. Chan. If you'd like, I could always show you some of the moves in those books. Her host laughed under his breath, and the heat on her face burned hot. Lucy wandered over to some papers on a nearby table as he started to pull away. Her eyes grew wide as she started reading their contents and became aware of what she was reading. The Stellar Spirit Mage turned to face Naruto, who had just started talking to Mirajane, and exclaimed, Your Hokage. Sama. In Magnolia Town, Levi Magarden was walking home with her teammates Jet and Droy after the Guildhall had shut down for the evening. It had been wise to heed Naruto's advice. A number of hooligan bands had spotted them together and had essentially fled. Before they were struck from behind and everything went dark, they were having a good time laughing and making jokes.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.